Right, it's 7:15, so we will start our meeting. So good evening members, good evening officers, and good evening members of the public. Lovely to see so many people here, and good evening to those who are watching on our YouTube channel. Welcome to our planning committee meeting this evening, and it's the whatever date it is today in September, 28th of October, sorry, October, not September. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. We have a full house this evening and do not have any apologies. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest or other registrable interest related to items of the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? And a lot of hands have gone up. Before I call you, I'll just give a joint declaration in relation to Councillor Staines and Councillor Taylor, who have both registered to speak this evening. So I'll move around the room. Councillor Hooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to give an NRI, is it? For item 7A, which is the TPO application in Rain. I am chair of Rain Parish Council, but I do not take part in any discussions regarding planning at the Parish Council, and I will stay and vote on that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooks. I think next, Councillor Ritchie, I think.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will disclose a non-registrable interest, please, in agenda item 5C, 25/01920 section 106 alpha. I'm one of the joint chairs of the Braintree Village Consultative Committees, and we had a fair degree of input into the agreement being sought tonight, so I shall leave the meeting with no debate or vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two to declare. The first one is item of NRIs. The first one is item 5B, 25015234, which is the Gypsy and Traveller site, Sybil Headingham. This item was discussed at a meeting of a local plan subcommittee and the site was allocated, but the advice I have from governance is that because planning is a completely separate process from local plan allocations, and provided there is no predetermination on my part, which there isn't, I can remain and take part in the debate. And the second one is item 6A, 24/7/0021 PPA, which is the paper on Norwich to Tilbury, NSIP. As the Cabinet Member for Planning, I have responsibility for signing off the response to PINS for this NSIP. So I will remain in the room, listen to the debate because I need to hear anything that members might have to say, but I will not take part in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Councillor Bowers next, I think.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. An NRI in item 5C, the 25/01920 S106A. Likewise with Councillor Ritchie, I'm also on the Braintree Village Consultative Committee, which has obviously discussed that item as part ahead of it coming to Planning Committee. So for that reason, I will leave the meeting for that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. And I think Councillor Abbott.
Item 6A for three reasons. Firstly, myself and a number of other people who live in the northern part of Rivenall Parish have been in discussions, negotiations with the grid people about the pylons, and some of the changes we have negotiated are referred to in the report. Secondly, because my property and those of my new neighbours will be probably severely impacted by the construction. And thirdly, because I will be a registered objector, so I will leave.
And Councillor Beavis, I think.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wanted to declare a NRI in the Wethersfield, Sybil Headingham Gypsy Traveller site. I have taken advice. A family member is one of the objectors, and there is an issue around personal safety. Many of the objectors are known to me in our personal capacity. I'm also chairman of Sybil Headingham Parish Council, who have objected to the site and are speaking this evening. And Councillor Taylor is also a member of Sybil Headingham Parish Council who's speaking this evening. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Beavis, can you
We'll be leaving the room. Yeah.
Is that everybody? No other hands going up. Okay, thank you, members. So that now brings us on to the next item of the agenda, which is minutes of the previous meeting. I have before me the minutes of the Planning Committee held on the 16th of September. Copies have been circulated. Is it your wish I sign?
Move the true
these
reflection,
correctly?
Madam Chairman.
Councillor Ritchie nominated, Councillor Abbott second, and...
I think Councillor Abbott wants to speak.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Abbott, I thought you were second.
Just a query, really. On the item on the bus gate, where we agreed an alternative for the Bellway Phase 4, the clear impression I got from the committee's decision was that the committee supported that option of the two, that there would be a turning circle rather than the road coming out onto Rickstones Road. Is that something that can be captured in the minutes, or does that go beyond the minutes, merely saying what the decision was in terms of deciding the application?
I'm just going to check this, Councillor Abbott. Okay. I think what we'll do is we'll go and check that point, Councillor Abbott, and then we'll bring it back to the next meeting. Okay, thank you. Right, next.
And I don't need to unmove that, do I? Having moved them? No, fine.
So next item on agenda is item 4, public question time. We don't have any registered speakers under this item, so we'll now move on to item 5 of the agenda, which is planning applications. So the first application we have before us, item 5A on the agenda. This is application number 24/01217 REM, which is land adjacent to Hatfield Road, Witham. And that is to be found on page 6 of your agenda. And we do have one speaker on this item, it's Mr. David Fletcher. If you'd like to come to the table and press the microphone button, and it's got 3 minutes for your statement. Thank you.
That's great, thank you, Chair. So, David Fletcher, I'm a planning consultant, and I'm speaking on behalf of Redrow's Witham project team. With me tonight, I've got Chris Gatland, who's project director from Redrow, along with our community engagement consultant, Lorna Byrne. I've worked on this project for some 13 years, from inception right at the beginning through to delivery. So I'm very pleased to be back here at Planning Committee tonight with what is the final phase of Lodge Farm. And just to give a bit of an overview, firstly, this phase is one of the smaller phases on Lodge Farm at 110 dwellings proposed. However, there's been no less effort expended on the preparation of the suitable proposals that are before you tonight. The design of the phase is sought to respond to the site-wide design code and also fully complies with the parameter plans that were set out as part of the outline application stage. It delivers a policy-compliant level of affordable housing in accordance with the Section 106 agreement, which we've discussed in detail with your housing officer. It meets the on-site open space proportion requirement and provides a compliant and evenly distributed parking for both residents and visitors across the phase. The mix of housing has been appropriately selected, with 1, 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings making up more than 55% of the total dwellings across this phase. This is alongside the 4 and 5 bedroom family properties which Redrow are most renowned for. All dwellings meet nationally prescribed space standards and Essex Design Guide guidance. In design, layout and terms, the final phase of the scheme offers a continuation of the mix of material treatments for the previous 2 phases. It is shaped around 3 character areas as set out in the site-wide design guide, with boulevard-style spine road, general provision for street trees, and a newly introduced central green space, which is not in the parameter plans but was something that Redrow are very keen to provide. We've ensured that all street trees have been selected to provide adequate space for planting to allow for the trees to grow and thrive. The application has been more than 3 years in the making, and the revision and betterment has been subject to a continuous process with your officers. We have made most recently minor adjustments to the scheme to take on board very late comments received from the Highway Authority. If approved this evening, work on this final phase is scheduled to commence in the early part of next year, which will enable Redrow to continue delivering vital housing at this site without delay, through to the end of 2028. By the end of this calendar year, Redrow understand they will have completed 460 dwellings at Lodge Farm, of which almost 150 have been affordable homes. We want to finally emphasise our commitment as a project team to continue to work with residents, officers and other stakeholders to ensure that development is completed to the very highest of standards. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We don't have any other speakers on this item, so now I will ask Ali to give the officers' presentation. Thank you, Ali.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Good evening, members. The application I present to you this evening is in relation to reserved matters for appearance, landscape, layout and scale for Phase 5 at Lodge Farm, Witham, also known as the Mulberries. The application seeks approval for 110 dwellings with associated landscaping, public open space and parking. Lodge Farm comprises 36 hectares of land, once predominantly arable farmland. It's situated on the south-western edge of Witham, north of Hatfield Road and the A12, and opposite the Gershwin Boulevard Maltings Lane development. Other site boundaries include the mainline railway line to the north, residential estates of the Alexis Way and Witham Lodge to the east, and Wood End Farm to the west, which has outline planning permission for 400 dwellings. The outline consent originally approved up to 750 dwellings, along with commercial units, an enterprise centre and a primary school. Following iterations, this was later reduced to 665 dwellings. To date, 524 dwellings have been consented by way of 5 separate reserved matters applications. 454 dwellings have been occupied, 305 of which are private and 149 affordable. This application for Phase 5, shown hatched on the screen, forms one of the final reserved matters phases for dwellings on the site. Phase 5, outlined in yellow here, is approximately 4.76 hectares and is located along the western edge of Lodge Farm, with Phase 4 to the north and the enterprise land to the south and Phase 1B to the south. On the eastern edge of the site are mature trees and hedgerows, with the Central Park play area, this area here, approved as part of the Phase 2 beyond. The western edge of the site features mature trees and hedgerows as well. The design guide ethos of the site is underpinned by the overall vision of the outline application master plan to provide an attractive gateway into the town with a mix of commercial, residential and open spaces along the northern side of Hatfield Road. The principle of development has been established by way of the outline planning permission, and therefore only layout, appearance, scale and landscaping are for consideration under this reserved matters application. During the lifetime of the application, the proposal has been modified following significant engagement between officers and applicant to overcome concerns regarding layout and design. In terms of layout, the site is broadly rectangular in shape, with a central tree-lined street running north to south, which links to the remainder of the Lodge Farm development and acts as the 2 main vehicular access points into the phase. To the eastern and western sides of the central tree-lined street are development parcels either side, and the approved outline parameter plan dictates the road structure through the site, along with footpaths which run down both sides and the height of buildings. In terms of scale, the application proposes residential dwellings as a series of 2, 2.5 and 3-storey detached, semi-detached and terraced dwellings, with the inclusion of a block of flats to the north, eastern corner, and 1-storey bungalows here. The taller 2.5 and 3-storey buildings are located along the eastern edge, fronting the adjacent park. The remainder of the site is mainly 2 storeys in height, shown in green, with a scattering of 2.5-storey marker dwellings, which is shown in red. The height of the proposed dwellings are in accordance with the approved building heights parameter plan approved at the outline stage. The appearance of the dwellings are in general accordance with the approved Site1 design guide approved at the outline stage as well. The mix of materials would include red buff brick, light-coloured render, light and dark coloured weatherboarding, red, brown and slate grey colour roof tiles in line with the previously consented palette of materials. Chimneys also feature throughout the site on prominent buildings. The design of the dwellings do not seek to create stark variations, but subtle changes that make the development feel cohesive to the rest of the approved Lodge Farm sites. 3 character areas have been proposed for the site: the western rural edge to the west, the neighbourhood setting in the middle, and the parkside setting to the east. The western rural edge, which currently overlooks the open countryside onto the wood end farmland and consists of medium density housing, providing an appropriate transition to a soft development edge utilising existing field hedgerows and field boundaries. This area consists of 2-storey detached and semi-detached typologies, with limited instances of 2.5-storey buildings and 1-storey bungalows. The neighbourhood setting character area is located within the centre of the site and features the highest density. Building typologies consist of detached and semi-detached 2 and 2.5-storey dwellings, as well as terraced and mews housing typologies. The built form in this area will have a strong urban frontage and a consistent building line close to the back edge of the footway. Visitor parking will be located in streets in defined parking courts, and traffic calming measures such as raised tables and crossroads features defined by street trees will act as keynotes throughout this character area. The Parkside character area runs along the eastern edge overlooking Phase 2. The built form varies in terms of dwelling size and features 2.5 and 3-storey townhouse typologies. A 3-storey apartment block, which can be seen on the screen here, is located in the northwest corner of the site to match the design ethos of the adjacent Phase 4 apartment block. In terms of residential quality, all the dwellings have an adequate level of internal and external space. All units are dual aspects and provide good levels of natural light and outlook. All the dwellings are in accordance with Essex Design Guide and NDSS in terms of internal and external amenity space and separation distances. In terms of affordable housing, the Section 106 agreement attached to the outline permission requires 30% provision. The application proposes a total of 33 affordable dwellings, 24 of which will be for affordable rent, which are shown red on the plan, and 9 shared ownership dwellings, shown grey on the plan. The proposal also includes 2 wheelchair accessible units, accessible housing bungalows which comply with Building Regulations Part M4 Category 3A. The Council's housing officer is supportive of the affordable mix and location. In terms of market housing, the proposal does not accord with the Council's SHMA in that there is an obvious under-provision of 2-bed dwellings and over-provision of 4+ bed dwellings. The original outline was considered prior to the adoption of the new local plan, so there is no planning condition on the outline permission that requires that the mix of market dwellings matches the mix specified in the SHMA. The SHMA does state that market housing mix can deviate from the expected percentage mix should the site be more suitable to an alternative mix. The pattern of development and size of houses within the previous phases of Lodge Farm edges towards a mix of larger dwellings, all of which have been sold and are currently occupied. This is not considered in its own right to form a reason for refusal. In terms of open space, the phase delivers a total of 0.92 hectares of open space and complies with the outline Section 106, which requires 7.31 hectares to be delivered throughout the site. The open space is segregated again into 3 character areas: the parkland edge to the east, the open space and the informal edge to the park, The existing hedge and tree planting will be enhanced, and footpaths and shared cycleway will create direct links into the adjacent park with access points here. The western edge open space creates a strong landscape buffer which helps to soften the visual impact of the development and views into the site from the west. The open space features a perimeter leisure route with connections north and south. The path features a sculpture trail providing opportunities for play and seating. The central green measures approximately 570 square metres and is located in the heart of Phase 5, designated as a formal landscape space enclosed by feature railings and a hornbeam hedge. The area would incorporate seating and natural features, providing opportunities for informal doorstop play. In terms of new landscaping, new planting will build on the character of the existing vegetation to create a landscape-dominated setting to the development, reinforcing the parkland character and providing opportunities for biodiversity. A hierarchy of tree planting is proposed with native, evergreen, deciduous specimen trees. New strategic tree planting is incorporated along the streets, throughout areas of public open space and along the green corridors, totalling 106 new trees. All of the street trees will be located within management company land. Given the quantity of trees that have perished at Lodge Farm in recent years, the Council's Landscape Officer has recommended further details of tree planting come forward to ensure that every effort is made to prevent trees from dying. The application proposes the removal of a Category U hedgerow, which is located to the south of the site here. This is to facilitate the creation of one dwelling, open space, the drainage infrastructure, footpath and access into the private drive. The hedgerow measures approximately 60 metres in length and consists of elder, smooth-leafed elm and common hawthorn. The report that accompanied the application states that the structural condition is poor and features Dutch elm disease and dead trees. Whilst the removal of any existing vegetation is disappointing, the loss of this low-quality hedgerow is considered to be minor and can be mitigated with new native planting as part of the Landscape Master Plan, which in turn will increase biodiversity on the site, including the addition of 106 trees. Whilst ecology was considered at the outline stage, an updated ecological appraisal accompanied the application, which was assessed by the Council's ecologist. No objections were raised, however lighting details will come forward by way of condition to ensure that all lighting is bat sensitive on the site. Parking provision has been made in accordance with Essex parking standards. A total of 215 allocated parking spaces have been provided, which you can see in pink, and 29 visitor spaces, which are evenly distributed throughout the site. Bin storage areas are located within rear gardens, and bin collection points are located where necessary to ensure the appropriate building control bin drag distances. In terms of highway adoption, a late concern was raised by Essex Highways in that they would not adopt the loop road to the north of the site, this road here. This was necessary as refuse collection vehicles are required to drive on the road for waste collection. This resulted in further discussion with Waste Services and Highways, and a solution was found in that BDC Waste Services will now drive on the unadopted road, subject to a legal agreement being entered into. From this, a suite of updated plans was submitted and the principle of a legal agreement agreed between the Council and the applicant to ensure no liability on BDC should there be any damage to private roads from refuse vehicles using them. A separate written update report accompanies the application and has been circulated to members today. These updates relate to highways considerations and waste collection, which I've discussed during the presentation. Following the responses received from Highways and BDC Waste Services. It also relates to a correction to the housing mix and market housing mix, arboricultural impact assessment and method statement, an amendment to a list of the approved plans due to the last-minute Highways considerations. Also, the subsequent amendment to recommendation to include the requirement for a legal agreement. In conclusion, the principle of residential development of the site is established under the existing outline permission. Highways considerations have been resolved. The application submission is well designed and carefully considered proposal, and officers consider that the proposed appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of the development is acceptable in planning terms, subject to the recommended conditions. It's therefore recommended that members resolve to grant planning permission subject to the Section 106 heads of terms and recommended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for taking us through that fairly detailed application. Members who would like to kick off comments? Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It was quite scary what Mr Fletcher said, that it's taken 13 years, because it only seems like 5 minutes to some of us. So 13 years have flown past, and I have to say that this site, when you come off the A12 and drive as though you're going in towards Witham, is actually a good view, and it is a pleasant build that we've seen there. Not all of them are pleasant to view, and I know beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I think it always looks a nice, clean, tidy site. The question I'd like to ask is the legal agreement. This concerns me a little bit. The legal agreement between Braintree District Council and the developer about the refuse lorries driving on the road, is that an unusual legal agreement? And how long does it last for? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. No, it's not an unusual legal agreement. We have had it on many sites. We're moving away from allowing, we're designing schemes now going forward so that refuse vehicles do not drive on any unadopted roads. A lot of our previous schemes, refuse vehicles have driven on unadoptable roads, and therefore if there's any damage, there is a liability to the council. So any applications that can't achieve complete road adoption, we're taking this approach only for developments that we've been dealing with for a long time, because obviously the housing numbers, with the additional turning heads, the housing numbers are reducing on sites. We have to take it into consideration from, the pre-app stage. For this particular site, we haven't had an indemnity on any of the other phases, but we have put conditions on for 26 tonnes, but it's something that we're moving towards to make sure there's no liability on BDC. But no, it's not unusual. We have had them on other sites as well.
The reason behind that, Madam Chairman, is because the refuse vehicles are large and they're heavy. And with most houses now having more cars than what they may have done even 20 years ago, I have seen damage done by the refuse vehicles, which really is no fault of their own. It's due to the amount of cars that are parked on the road, and it's making their turning round and manoeuvring almost impossible in some roads. So it just concerns me, because you can see damage coming before it comes, if you get what I mean. But if that's what you're happy with, then I'm fine with that. It just concerns me, and also the weight of them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Diamond, hand up next.
I'll be brief. I was really pleased with this application. I thought it seemed very well thought through and really matches the needs of local people. I was obviously pleased to see the large amount of affordable housing, which I know I often say, but I was also really pleased about the amount of open spaces and communal areas. I know some of the pictures on there were really helpful, and they did look incredibly positive. Biodiversity, parking, the mixture of houses has clearly been very well thought through. And I also like the fact as well that they've clearly listened to what the officers said as they've made adjustments, whether it be to highways, layout and design. So this seems very positive.
Thank you, Councillor Diamond. Councillor Abbott. Councillor Beavers, I'll let you go first.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I'm mindful that Councillor Abbott may pick up some of these issues as well, being sort of closer to the locality. Just picking up on the point by Councillor Bowes-Flint, I do understand the point of the refuse lorries, and clearly we've got the new rollout of the bins from February of next year onwards. And we spoke about the bin storage and the communal bin storage. And I just wondered whether that is fitting the new proposals from the council, because I do look in my tenure as a district council an awful lot of communal bin storage, and it's very tight actually, and I think they're going to struggle in their current form. And I wanted to just be reassured that with this new site, the capacity for more bins is going to be there. So that's my first question. My second question is around the tree planting. There's an awful lot of trees and new trees and hedging going on the site and landscaping. And it's just the maturity of those trees. I didn't really get that from the report. I just wanted to pick up on that. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention, because it was mentioned, is about the chimney pots going on, because it gives a better look. I live in a house with chimney pots, and they're used because we have burners and fires. And I just get irritated when I see chimney pots go on that aren't actually, they don't have a function. And I just think to myself, you know, on sort of an environmental head thought really, why aren't we just doing more with solar? Or surely in this day and age something can be done that's actually, you know, there's a space there. Why are we putting plastic chimney pots on when we could do something that's more environmentally friendly? And you might hear a bit more from me over the years on this, because it niggles me. That's it. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Annie, do you want to pick up a couple of those points?
Thank you, Councillor Bevis. In terms of the bin capacity, yes, we have been, for about 6 months now, we've been designing all of the schemes that have come forward to us with the new bin rollout, so to speak. So the commercial bins are large enough to cater for the new bin rollout next year, along with the bin areas in the back gardens. They're big enough to cater for the amount of bins as well. So that's why it's taken a long time to get this application through, because we got to the end and then almost had to start from the beginning in terms of highways, drag distances. Now, in terms of some of the private drives, when we're talking about the damage and the smaller roads, there are bin collection points that residents will pull their bins to the bin collection points, and the refuse service operatives will walk onto those smaller drives to prevent any kind of conflict between the refuse vehicle and cars. And that's why we've been coming back and forth to some of these schemes, so that there is no conflict, that the bin sizes are large enough, the areas are large enough, and that we reduce the amount of roads that the refuse vehicles are driving on. The second point was the hedging. Yes, there is an awful lot of hedging and tree planting, and we have seen a lot of the hedging and tree planting fail on the other side, on the other phases. Over the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, on a yearly basis, there have been kind of reports and I suppose going out on the site and making sure that the surveys undertaken of the existing trees, any that had diseased or died, they are being replanted. But I can tell you that there has been a lot that have died. This is why that our arboriculturist has looked at this application in so much detail and added the additional conditions on to make sure the species, the size, the type, the canopy cover, it's additional conditions that we put on to make sure that it's all covered off. Particularly with climate change as well, we're finding that some of the trees are just not withstanding the hot summers, given the amount of water that they need. I think I've covered that point off. Have I covered that point off? Yeah. In terms of chimneys, that's interesting that you should say that, because in terms of a design and aesthetics, we consider as officers and design officers that a street looks more, I suppose, sympathetic and more interesting with chimneys. And I know they're fake and they don't serve a purpose. We've actually asked Redrow to put chimneys on some of the prominent buildings. But I do understand your point about the solar panels as well, and why can't they be useful? Unfortunately, it's not something we can take through in the planning. It is a building control issue that falls under building control. Some of the developers at this stage, we can put Section 106s on. This development is so old now, really, when you look at it on paper, that we haven't brought those kind of things forward. It's just the same as the biodiversity net gain. We haven't been able to secure biodiversity net gain because it came in before after the application was approved. Does that answer your questions?
It's really helpful. Yeah, it does. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ali, for explaining how much detail we have to go into on the refuse collection.
Yes. Yes.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I agree with other members that this estate, as it's been built so far, is one of the better ones in the district. It does provide a quite a good aspect as you come into town. And this application does appear to have, as other members have said, thought of most things. However, there are a few points I wanted to raise. Firstly, perhaps the name Western Rural Edge might need amending, because it's not going to stay like that for very long. The point about trees, I think, is a really serious one. And for those of us who've been following the science since the late 1970s, early 1980s, chickens are coming home now. Mm-hmm. On many development sites, the trees are either dying or struggling. Mm. And we have, I mean, the ones in Cressing that are put in this summer, I don't know how much they're being watered, but it's not just a question of the species, it's a question of what you plant them in. Now, many building sites, I'm sorry to say, my dad was a builder, they bury stuff in the ground. There's rubble in there, there's oil will get in there. I'm not saying Redrow and Witham have done this, but many building sites, and sites where I've taken it to officers like Bellway and Rivenor, one end of the site was basically a dump of material that they buried underneath a load of soil. You try planting trees into that, they're going to struggle. So it's good quality soil, the right type of trees, but critically watering and mulching. And we are seeing these failure rates going up and up and up. And I don't know, do we need a stronger condition? Perhaps we might need to look at that as time goes on. So I agree on that point. Very disappointed to see the hedge coming out and this description again of low quality. Whenever trees or hedges, developers want to get rid of them, they get an ecologist to describe them as low quality. Now, I haven't seen this hedge specifically, but I would imagine it's not all dead. And I often cite the one in Western Road, Silver End, which was described as low quality, dying. I've put pictures of that on social media, which have been seen by hundreds of thousands of people. It was a magnificent hedge. So it's a shame we're going to lose 60 metres of hedge, particularly with species like eldarin. That's a big shame. Bat-sensitive lights. I mean, there's no really such thing as bat-sensitive lights. What you've got to avoid doing is lighting the bat corridors and their roosting areas. So I don't know I know there's a condition in there, that's good, but really what that wants to do is make sure the lights aren't shining on hedges and trees where their corridors are at all. And to do that, actually it's quite simple. You just have the light designed so that they shine downwards and have shields at the back, and also keeping the colour temperature down. But I'm afraid to say again, on most of the developments I go back to look at, once they're up, that hasn't happened. And if you want to look at Redrow, Silver End, there used to be bats there aren't now. The whole area is lit up. So we say these things, but is it actually what actually happens? And my last point was on solar panels, which Councillor Beavis raised. I think in the report there was mention the approach is sort of fabric first, and there's going to be heat pumps. But are any of these homes going to have solar panels? Because I think it's interesting that when this development started off a decade ago, that was around about the time David Cameron said unkind things about green energy and got rid of what we were moving towards, which was a more regimented scheme where we were requiring or having more clout to be able to influence developers. Whereas over the last decade, of course, it's been such a wasted opportunity, millions of properties built with hardly any solar panels on them. So was that part of the discussion? Will any of these homes have solar panels? Thank you.
In answer to your question, no.
Does it, Councillor Abbott, I think condition 19 is a specific condition on tree planting, which I don't think we've had before. I hope you're happy with that.
Oh, is it, right, I might have missed that. Is that different to one we've had before?
Yes, we've got 3 conditions on tree planting with species, depth of trees, canopy cover. There's 3 very strong conditions that have been recommended by our arboriculturist.
I did see them. What I was more talking about was the aftercare.
It's enforcement, yeah.
I mean, have we got anything in the conditions or an advisory, or we could beef up, because I mean, the officers are saying the same as we're saying.
Yeah.
That we've got the losses are getting really critical on these development sites. Is there anything more we can do to beef that up, to say you've really got to do your utmost to keep them alive in the early few years?
I think condition 17, landscaping, covers that strategy for watering and maintenance. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, bear with me, sorry. Yeah, that's fine. I'll just find it.
Councillor Abbott, looking at the wording of the condition, so it is something that we've been working closely with the new officers within our landscape services team, particularly around this. So it's been mentioned this evening, this summer in particular has probably been the worst that we've had in terms of the impact it's had on new tree planting and landscaping. Obviously, in terms of the conditions, I think these are probably as far as we can go. What we need to do, and it's something which we've raised with Redrow, and Redrow are aware of in terms of the early phase of Lodge Farm, but we've got it on other developments as well, where the landscaping fails, it needs to be replaced within a certain period of time. So that's something that I think as a team, we will be looking to do more work on some of the development sites to try to get that replaced. But there is a substantive issue here that in terms of the watering arrangements need to be really on point, and they need to be done throughout the summer, because otherwise we'll end up with the same result each time. So we're acutely aware of that. I'm not sure the conditions can be stretched any further in terms of the requirements. What we can do is make sure that when these come through to be discharged as conditions, we can make sure that the details are satisfactory, and again the arboriculturists within the team will review that. So we'll have the scrutiny, but then it's just making sure that actually it's implemented. So all the points you've raised about the tree pits, the quality of the soil and so forth, those are all important factors, but the watering is a real key factor. And even with that provision, we still possibly will end up with failures. I can't guarantee that we won't end up in a similar situation, but what we need to try to do is to get to a position where that landscaping is being refreshed and replanted, and hopefully better maintained, or as well maintained as it can be.
I'll just come back on that point. I think the purpose of the three conditions were to make sure, firstly, the species were correct, secondly, they were planted appropriately in the correct depth, and then the third condition is with regards to the watering and maintenance of the landscaping. So we're hoping that all three are strong enough to make sure that they go over and above what we usually put on an application, which is just, you know, specification of planting and species, and we may ask for tree pit details as well. This goes over and above that in terms of the detail that we've asked for previously.
Just in addition on the point about the hedgerow, so completely note the comment. Obviously, we have looked, the arboriculturist has looked at the quality and critiqued the report that was submitted to accompany the application. Just by reference in terms of Western Road again, obviously I'm just going to make the point, Councillor Abbott, I know very strong feelings locally about it, but it was a decision obviously it was made by the planning inspectorate as opposed to this authority as the relevant local planning authority. I completely agree with you in terms of Western Road, and to be fair to Redrow, who would bring forward that site, that was before their involvement in the site as well. So yeah, we have to obviously consider any losses in the round, but we do seek to retain existing features wherever possible, and that is something we really do critique as a team. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Spray, I think, next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Continuing with the landscaping theme, there is a lot in the report, quite rightly, about landscaping, planting, replacement of trees, hedgerows, and planting generally. And I do hope that the landscaping scheme for this site comes forward. I do hope that the planting survives. I appreciate that very dry summers don't help, but there are, I think, you know, there are types of plants that we can use to mitigate that. And the reason I say this in particular is because on a different Redrow site, not this one, not Lodge Farm, but elsewhere in the district, landscaping has not gone according to the plan, and planting has failed pretty dismally. And this is despite the best efforts of Lorna Byrne, who is in the audience this evening for Redrow. I don't know Lorna at all, we never met, but I've lost count of the number of emails we've exchanged about that particular site. And Lorna has done an absolutely sterling job of tackling contractors and trying to put right what has gone wrong on what is actually, it's largely centred around a children's play area on that site. So it's been really disappointing for residents on that site not to be able to use the play area. And I think we're getting there. I think we're just about there with that one now. But I would absolutely hate, Lorna, to have to spend as many hours on this one, once it gets going, chasing people up and trying to put things right, as many hours as she spent on what is, another site. So I do hope that we can get it right on this one. And I absolutely echo comments made by Councillor Beavis, Councillor Abbott, and so on, that it's really important we get the planting right, that we look after it, and that we don't have to keep coming back to replace failed landscaping and planting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. I think now Councillor Ritchie has got his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just picking up again on condition 19 and some of the comments that a number of members have made this evening. I think this almost needs to be a bit of a blueprint for what we put into applications for the care and the maintenance for trees, because I think this would, first of all, encourage developers to get it right first time. I think it's in their interest to do so as well, because the cost of having to redo a planting scheme surely outstrips the cost of some of the detail contained in condition 19, which is full details of proposed tree planting, including cross-section drawings, methods of irrigation. I've not really seen that too much in the past before, whereby if we've got a firm plan as to how they're going to carry that out, whilst the trees are becoming established, with the safety net of if they do not take within 5 years, either after the last completion or during the scheme, then they will be replanted again. I think it just encourages the whole point around get it right first time, and you won't need to go back behind yourselves and spend additional monies from your bottom line. So fully supportive of the strength of the new conditions. I think we need to seriously consider inserting those on all major developments going forward. Thank you.
I think that Chris has noted that comment. Councillor Schwer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to echo a lot of the comments that have been made already, but just wanted to mention that I think the housing mix on this is very good too, and the variation in the roof heights as well is going to add to the whole landscaping aspect of it as well. I think enough has been said, but I agree with Councillor Ritchie that actually this should be a template for all of the planning applications coming forward with regard to sort of the care and planting of trees, because it's planting the trees at the right time with the right type of tree for the soil as well, because that's imperative that we understand the difference between alkaline and acidic soils and everything else, various parts of Essex. So I think welcome that. And of course, just really a couple of other things is one. I was very pleased to hear the comments about the bins that have already been mentioned, and the fact that officers are taking all of the comments that we have made in the past with regards to changes in waste services, but also to start future-proofing that for our developments going forward across Braintree. And the other thing is to just ensure that you mentioned about the legal agreements of the unadopted highways going forward to future. Will that be transferable completely to also the unit trees when they come into effect on the 1st of April 28, because obviously that's really important.
I think the simple answer, Councillor Schwer, is yes. So that's my understanding in terms of the legal agreement point.
Councillor Bowers.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Echoing the comments in regards to the waste and the future proofing, and obviously the changes in the proposals for the waste. But just to drill down a little bit into that, which I know Ali kindly provided, I think, quite a lot of detail. But obviously with the new waste proposals, where we've got paper and card and mixed recycling and food waste as well as residual waste, just to double check with because with the the garden waste collections. It's a service, a subscription service that's very popular in this district, and I just wanted to double check that the space that is going to be available in the bin standing area in the back gardens is going to be big through your consultation with the waste team. Is that area going to be large enough for properties that take up the garden waste subscription service, so that will have enough room for all the bins that will be needed going forward? Thank you.
The answer is yes. It just takes into consideration one green bin though, because I understand that you can have 2 green bins, but it just takes into consideration the 1 green bin.
Councillor Beeves, did you want to come back?
Just very briefly, Madam Chairman, just to thank Alison for that detail that we are looking at policies slightly different when it does come to variety and types of trees. And I think, you know, we've heard it from members this evening, because I think sometimes we just have to remember, particularly when, you know, sites are one on appeal, that actually what was there before, and it was somebody's long view that's disappeared. And we all appreciate that, you know, homes have to come and that we need homes, but it's not just Red Row. And hearing from Councillor Spray this evening, the level of detail by the company as well that's going back, and so it gives you some comfort that there is a greater level of enforcement, I think could be a blueprint for us, and something that I think maybe going forward we need to strengthen. So I'm really pleased to hear from other members on this evening, so thank you.
Right, well, I think we've had a good debate. Councillor Bowers, did you want to come back quickly?
Yeah, no, I was going to move officer's recommendation, Madam Chairman, just with 2 points really. First of all, I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Beevers over chimneys. I do not get why we ask developers to put brick chimneys on houses that have got no fire, only central heating by wet radiators. And a development that was built very close to me, I actually queried with the site foreman why there was chimneys on the house when there's no fires, and he told us that's what planning said we'd got to do to make them look pretty. So, yeah, I'm not a planning officer. And the other thing is, it's in Councillor Abbott's ward, but it's very close to where I live. It's so important because I have now seen 5 replacements of trees where they've all been lost purely and simply because they haven't been watered and looked after. And surely it's in any developer's interest to only buy trees once rather than 5-6 times, because the cost is phenomenal. So surely it's in their interest. But so those conditions are welcome to see it. So I'm happy to move it. Thank you.
Can I have a seconder? Councillor Beevis. All those in favour of officer's recommendation to grant this application? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. Right, so that now brings us on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 5B, application number 25/01523 full. This is land north of Wethersfield Road, Sybil Headingham. This is page 75 of your agenda. Just allow Councillor Beevis to leave. So we do have a number of speakers on this item, and the first speaker is Mr. Roy Bussink. If you'd like to come to the table, thank you.
Chair and members, I'd like to begin by thanking the Planning Officer for the clarity of the report. Residents fully support the recommendation to refuse this application. We appreciate how complex these cases are, and we want to focus on the practical safety and amenity issues that remain unresolved. The access onto Wethersfield Road is the defining concern. It sits on a blind bend with no footpath, frequent on-street parking and regular movement of cars, buses, farm vehicles and motorbikes. Essex Highways formally objected identifying severely restricted visibility in both directions and substandard geometry at the junction. No new drawing or verified visibility plan has been published to address that. Members will know how critical highways advice is. If an access cannot be proven safe for everyday vehicles, it certainly cannot be relied upon for emergency or serve as access. Essex Fire and Rescue confirmed that compliance cannot yet be considered satisfactory until width and load-bearing capacity are demonstrated. These details are still absent. With no pavement and limited verges, pedestrians and vehicles share the same narrow space. The mix of through traffic, buses, farm machinery and motorbikes on that bend makes even small movements in and out of the site very risky. Residents witness it every day. Drainage is another serious concern. The report rightly notes the lack of any sustainable drainage design or maintenance plan. The existing ditch and drainage network generally cope with all but flash floods, but the extensive area of hardcore now laid across the site means water drains into the ditch much faster. Less can soak naturally into the soil, increasing the speed and volume of runoff, and with it the risks of flooding to neighbouring properties. Residents respect the planning process. We simply ask that it works fairly and safely for everyone. The officer's assessment captures that balance, recognising the need for appropriate sites, but not at the expense of highway safety or proper drainage control. Chair and members, for all these reasons, we ask you to support the officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blessing. So the next person to speak on this item is Mr. John Curtin. Thank you, Mr. Curtin.
Chairman and members, this land once supported a really wide variety of wildlife: owls, bats, hedgehogs, reptiles, amphibians, almost certainly some of them red listed. They were part of our daily lives. The Ecology Officer's well-written report confirms that the clearance of mature trees and the hard-standing works that have already taken place is likely causing a loss of biodiversity value before any permission was ever sought. This loss of biodiversity cannot easily be quantified, making it difficult to ensure that the development meets the 10% improved biodiversity threshold required. Despite all the hard work of BDC enforcement, new structures chip away further at the character of the field. It now resembles, even outside the planning area, it resembles a construction yard, and given how it is progressing, I wonder how the old building mentioned in the Ecological Officer's report will be removed before this baseline is determined. So it is likely there are very few protected species left needing protection. Any bats will have likely left because the occupant has already put a dog kennel next to the building. The Environmental Health Report asks that no ground be disturbed and no vegetables grown until contamination has been assessed, yet a children's play area and a vegetable patch have already been created. There is no mention of the type of sewage plant already being used, and if any additional is planned, and therefore no way of knowing the damage that the current effluent is doing or the safeguards that are or should be in place to prevent any public health risk or further ecological damage in the future. The whole process has been rushed to a decision before evidence is even completed. Even statutory consultees like the Essex Fire and Rescue Service were only approached in mid-September. The environmental damage has already been done to a significant level which cannot easily be undone or any meaningful baseline produced. Our arguments have not been about who is making the application, but about fairness, planning law, due process and protection of the environment we all share. I respectfully ask that you refuse this application, thus restoring the confidence in the fact that rules and laws apply equally to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin. And the next person wishing to speak is Councillor Christine Calver from Sybil Hedingham Parish Council.
Good evening, Chair and members. The view is this is not the right place for this development. The site is not located centrally within or adjacent to core services in Sybil Hedingham, which are very modest in any event: schools, doctors and local shops. And in practice, the width of the road, bend in the road and the proposed usage by caravans is going to cause issues. Although there is an extensive footpath network, this is unlikely to mitigate additional movement of people, particularly in the winter. A serious concern is that this site will grow and so will these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, for allowing this call-in. I understand the requirement of the Council to identify 37 pitches for gypsy and travellers within the district. However, there are more suitable sites than the Wethersfield Road application. As a Hedingham Ward member, I support the officer's recommendation to refuse the application, and as a member of Sybil Parish Council, I concur with their objections in paragraph 8. Addressing some of the reasons for refusal, reason 1 states that the proposed development has not demonstrated that safe and suitable access can be achieved for all users. This is supported by residents' comments relating to 2 accidents in the last 10 months, damage to property and cars, and road blockages with traffic associated with the asylum centre. Can the narrow road accommodate larger vehicles associated with the traveller site? The site is home to bats, hedgehogs, owls, birds of prey, and a wide range of fauna. The concern is no ecological assessment has been submitted to evaluate, minimise the impact on protected habitat and species, and how it would achieve the minimum 10% biodiversity net gain required for the development. Residents are already reporting a depletion in wildlife. Reason 3 indicates that given the identified constraints of the site, layout, access, ecology, drainage, contamination, the proposal would result in overdevelopment of the plot and fails to demonstrate acceptable standards of amenity. The report notes that surface water damage could be managed through a suitable worded planning condition and drainage strategy. However, this area is a flood risk, and the fear is the quantity of hard standing required for this site, 6 pitches, amenity areas, touring caravans, parking, bin storage and workshops will generate a considerable amount of runoff leading to flooding. I would direct you to the photographs provided by residents of the floods they have experienced. There are concerns over how the sewage from the site will be dealt with. Will the additional discharge into the ditch cope when the ditch is running full or floods? Would waste from the sewers contaminate the flood water? So in summary, the points above apply to whether there are 2, 4, 6 caravans. EDC Highways have objected. The proposal is not acceptable in terms of highway safety. VDC Ecology objected. Loss of protected species and habitat. The Parish Council objected. Concern over access growth and environmental impact. There have been 28 representations received in objection to the proposal. And finally, the concerns raised over flooding, contamination and drainage. So, I hope that the members will endorse the officer's recommendation to refuse the application, and if they are minded to do so, will the draft allocation be removed from the local plan review? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Now, the final person wishing to speak on this application is Mr. Mark Turner. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Good evening, councillors. My name is Mark Turner and I speak on behalf of the applicant Maria, who is here with me tonight. This is a retrospective application for the material change of use of this land to a permanent gypsy and traveller site. I want to begin with the significant areas of agreement as noted in your officer's report. First, the site is acceptable in principle for this use. Second, the visual impacts are acceptable. Third, this is previously developed land. Most importantly, we agree that this council has an urgent unmet need for 37 pitches. This single application would provide 16% of that total need in one go, securing a permanent home for a family with strong local ties. Councillors, this was the only site that came forward during your call for sites process. A committee of members just like you have already resolved to allocate it. Because of this severe undersupply of pitches, the tilted balance applies. This means the proposal should be approved unless any adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the clear benefits. So let's look briefly at the concerns your officers raised. On highways, the concern is about the access, but this is a retrospective application, so we don't need to guess about the impact. The family have used the exact access for 18 months with no accidents associated with their use. The MPPF test is for a severe impact and the real-world evidence on the ground proves there is no severe impact. On overdevelopment, there is a misunderstanding that the existing buildings will be demolished. That's incorrect. The application is for the use of the land. We have provided alternative plans that show the homes can comfortably be sited and the existing buildings remain, with all ecological concerns being overcome. On ecology, because these buildings are remaining, the ecological concerns related to their demolition are resolved. On waste and contamination, the applicant is happy to accept conditions for a packaged treatment plant and any contamination survey, just as your environmental health officer suggested. We want the site to be safe and functional for the family as well. Finally, biodiversity net gain. The regulations are clear. BNG does not apply to retrospective applications of this nature. This has been a retrospective application from day one. Councillors, the benefits here are clear, substantial and immediate. You can meet 16% of your gypsy and traveller need tonight on a suitable site you have already endorsed for a local family. The officer's concerns are either based on a misunderstanding or can easily be solved by conditions. The harms do not and cannot meet the high policy bar of significantly and demonstrably outweighing the benefits. We respectfully ask you to grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. So we'll now move on to the officer presentation, which is going to be given by Jack.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Thanks, speakers as well. Interesting to hear the different views. So this application is 25/01523/4, which is a retention of the material change of use of land permanent residential gypsy traveller site for 6 pitches and 1 amenity room in Sybil Hedingham. The location plan shows the site as it's described north of Wethersfield Road. The site is edged red. It encompasses the track which runs across the eastern and northeastern perimeter of the site and opens up where the pitches would be sited at the end. It's in this area where the hard standing reference in the description of development is. The 6 pitches are laid out on the site layout plan as shown. We'll zoom into this image shortly, but you can see the amenity area on the left. You can see the 6 touring caravans parts on the right. To the south by southwest of the site, you can see the bus depot. To the south, you can see the properties that face onto Wethersfield Road. So the zoomed-in block plan of the site area shows the arrangement of static caravans, the existing day room referenced as an amenity room in the description, and the touring caravans there on the right. This is a typical elevation of the static caravans. They have a typical modular appearance with an area of decking around the side. That's the floor plan, which shows living areas, 2 bedrooms, bathrooms, etc. A typical elevation of the touring caravans, which are shown on the northeast of the site, on the site layout plan. And the amenity day room, which was shown on the western side of the plan. And its proposed floor plan. Members update, since the publishing of the report, Essex County Fire and Rescue Service did come back to our request for consultation, and they posed a number of operational requirements for them to consider. Most of these formatives are considered at a building regulations observation stage, but officers do note that although the access road does pinch in some points, it does look as though by condition those could be met. Informatives were relating to building regulations, water supplies and sprinkler systems, which are fairly common in the advice. A revised plan was submitted last week, and the LPA did acknowledge the submission of the plan to address concerns surrounding overlapping, which was referenced by one of the speakers tonight. I'll show you that shortly. The revised plan hasn't been accepted due to the time in which it was submitted and the ability to consult on it within the timescales. We as officers have a duty to consider a fair process, and that includes reconsultation of revised plans if needed. We do also have the requirement to determine applications within statutory timeframes, so we haven't been able to accept it at this late stage, but for members' benefit, this is shown here as acknowledged but not accepted. So the full site plan, essentially as shown in the committee report, talks about two pitches potentially overlapping onto some dilapidated barns. So if we look at the revised block plan and look at the site area, you can see, I'm not sure how clear it is here, but there is a cyan outline here and here of the locations of the barns, and you'll see them in the site photos how they appear. So what the site plan does show is that the buildings have shifted to the south to avoid those buildings. It doesn't address the concerns of in paragraph 11.3.12, which talks about the bedrooms of these rooms at the back looking directly onto those buildings and the poor amenity that may result. But nonetheless, that's what it shows. Now, a comparison with the original block plan, you can see that kind of shift. That's the revised, that's the original. So you can see the shift down. Whilst this is not an exact science, having measured the two plans, it is evident that the red line does also shift as those developments shift. Now, we haven't interrogated that much further because we haven't accepted the plan, but the other thing to note is between the revised plan and the original plan, there are a number of unaccounted for structures here and here, which, again, we would interrogate if we had accepted the plan, but for reference purposes, those were the revised plans. So, summarising first, and we'll go on to the photos, is that in principle, the officer's view is that this is an acceptable location for this type of development. It's not an isolated site and it could be accepted in principle. Now we are, the council is not meeting its supply, and we do need to find these sites. However, we do need to make sure that it meets all other policy requirements as well. For the following reasons, the application can't be supported, and those are highway safety, particularly restricted visibility at the access, which Essex Highways, ECC Highways, have objected to due to lack of visibility displays and speed data. Now, harm cannot be ruled out on that point, and whilst the access is currently in use, it may be retrospective. We don't have that evidence in front of us. We don't have that surety going forward that will always be the case. This is an intensification of this access, and whilst there are no reported access, officers are aware that there have been accidents in the past, so it's not an uncommon, or it's not as though it hasn't happened in the past. What that data also, although it isn't before me to consider, it doesn't consider things like near misses and the types of safety concerns that residents have raised to us. So we would need that data to be able to make a more informed decision. In terms of ecology, as we've described, there is a potential loss of dilapidated barns. Now, whether or not that is the intention isn't what the plan shows. Whether that could be revised, going forward through a new submission, that would be something we would need to consider. However, considering the plans that we've got, we can't, as officers, our view is that ecology harm can't be ruled out at this stage, and that could be addressed through a further submission. In terms of overdevelopment, The view is that the 6 pitches on the site edged red to accommodate all of the associated infrastructure would create a cramped layout with poor amenity in terms of overlooking between the pitch, between those decking areas into the neighbouring pitches, and poor outlook from the north of the site, as well as safety concerns given the cramped nature. Foul drainage has been referenced in many speakers tonight. It is a known issue. The lead local flood authority did provide us some advice on surface water which could be taken up by condition, but foul drainage details were missing, and given the flood concerns locally, this is a consideration that we would, as officers, wouldn't look to leave to condition. We would require that prior to determination to ensure that those measures are in place before we make before we were to take forward an approval. In terms of the site access, this is looking, if you take the map in the bottom right for reference, this is looking from the site. There is a set of gates sort of behind, so this is taken from there, and this is further back into the site, close to where the fence line terminates. So that's sort of the access on the approach up to Wethersfield Road. This is looking eastwards, so this is roughly 2 metres back from the carriageway. As you pull more towards the highway and then further still, that access around that roadside vegetation does clear out, although that stay pole does restrict some visibility. At a slow manoeuvre looking eastwards, the visibility is better in comparison to the west, which we'll look at now. This is a site, this is a photo looking at from the access due west. The officer's report talks about the hedge that is owned, and it's understood to be owned by 1 Wethersfield Road, which has recently been cut to allow this visibility through. Now, the owner of that site could allow that hedge to re-establish, at which point that visibility would be further restricted, and we've been provided no mechanism by which to protect that hedge, particularly as it falls within third-party ownership. But as you can see, the bend in the road is best probably seen in the parked cars here in the background, where you can see that on-street parking, the bend in the road and the visibility is severely reduced in this western direction. Now, because of these considerations, we wouldn't look to leave that to condition, as we have no assurance that that could be brought forward to the satisfactory of the highway authorities. This would be a matter that would need to be considered prior to determination. The actual site area, this is, you can see the development at the rear of the site. This is taken from the track, looking down towards the back, and this is as you make the approach to the open area of hard standing. So you can see a static caravan there, you can see the amenity area over there, and the 2 barns referenced as the dilapidated barns here at the back of the site. What these also show, I would add, is in terms of visual impact, we agree with the applicant on this, that the visual impact in our view is acceptable. You can see that the screen is somewhat encompassed by the vegetation that lines the perimeter of the site. Now up to the north it opens more into an unrolling open expansive countryside, which this is distinguished from, so we don't consider a countryside or a landscape impact, and provided that things could be laid out acceptably in a suitable manner, the report does talk about landscaping to further mitigate and integrate this into the site. I would add environmental health did raise about the contamination with regards to allotments, vegetation, vegetables, planting, things like that. Now, that response was received after this allotment was, there already when I visited the site, and the environmental health response was afterwards. We did note to the applicant to pay careful attention to what environmental health had said, but it isn't the case that environmental health said that and then the allotment was established. It's the other way around, but that contamination and whatnot could be controlled by condition. It's not one of the reasons for refusal. This image is looking back towards the south. You can see here the ridge line of the houses that front onto Wethersfield Road, and the expanse of land that sits between the two. Again, this could be further delineated through landscaping if the plan was to be found acceptable. Hence, it hasn't been involved as a reason for refusal. So, taking all that into account, it's recommended that the application is refused for the reasons for refusal which are set out within the Appendix 1 of the committee report. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for taking us through that. So to members, Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I just first of all clarify, because local authority sites, a pitch means 2 caravans, but here we are talking about 1 caravan per pitch rather than 2. Is that correct? And also I'm sure planning policy officers will welcome Councillor Taylor's list of available sites, because her words were there are more suitable sites. So we look forward, I'm sure the planning policy officers who are struggling to get those sites will be interested to see that list of where these sites are. Thank you.
Thank you. Just give me 2 seconds, I'll clarify with Chris. Yeah, we've proceeded on the purpose on this application, yeah, that 1 pitch is, yeah, one static, 1 touring, yeah. So it's 1 LPA pitch. 1 LPA pitch. Yeah. 1 static, 1 touring. That's in a lot of people's minds. That's 2 caravans. Yeah.
I think Mr. Padgett knows where I'm coming from and what I'm meaning.
Yeah, sorry, I think we are of the same understanding, we're just saying it in different ways, but yeah, it's 6 as 1 touring, 1 static, so.
Sorry, Madam Chairman. So you're talking about 6 statics and 6 tourings, or are you talking about 3 statics and 3 tourings? There's a big difference.
6 and 6, isn't it?
Yeah,
On the plan.
6 and 6, as per the plan, it's yeah.
So it's 12.
12 caravans.
Yeah, 12 caravans, 6 pitches, yeah. Your second question,
You don't need to answer.
escapes me.
Okay, you're not. There's nothing else you want to say, Jack, is there? Or
If you could clarify the second question, I'd be happy to come back on
okay.
that.
So, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the speakers this evening. I think you all made some very valid points this evening, and thank you for your time in presenting those. Just a couple of things I wanted to pick up on. So, yes, statement of facts. This is in the draft plan for allocation, and it has been put forward for it to be in there. This committee cannot change that decision. So I just want to be absolutely clear. We are the local planning authority this evening for planning committee. We are not the local plan subcommittee. Whilst many of us sit on both of those committees, we are here to decide the application before us. And I know sometimes it can be a bit polarising to have to look at gypsy and traveller sites, but it's part of our purpose as a local planning authority to look at sites and allocate sites within the district. In its current format, I can see why this is up for refusal this evening, and that's not to say that in a different format it might not be accepted if it was to come forward again with a future plan for a reduced size and allocation of sites. What we have the benefit of this evening is there's a number of objections, and one of those is from a statutory consultee in as much as highways, which gives us a pretty strong reason for siding with officers' recommendations for refusal this evening. But back to the point that that Councillor Bowes-Flint made, we are duty bound to allocate sites for gypsies and travellers within our local plan, and we need to find over 30 of those, whether it's in small sites allocations or in large site allocations. As I mentioned, as unpalatable as that may be to developers, and to landowners, we are duty bound to allocate those as part of our local plan. And I'm sure at some point along the process we will do that. As I mentioned, we are duty bound to do so. With regards to this application that's before us this evening, as mentioned, there are a number of reasons to side with officers' recommendations to refuse the site. I know a number of speakers have mentioned some issues around drainage, etc., and some other technicalities which could be overcome and would be overcome by the application of building control standards and environmental agency issues with regards to foul drainage and water management, etc. But in its current format, I would happily side with officers' recommendation this evening to refuse, given that the major statutory consultee in Essex County Council have objected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Schwer. Councillor Roberts, are you first?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, Councillor Schwer first, then Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to echo the comments that Councillor Ricky made about this site. And I think the most important thing is the statutory consultee on safety of access there, because those of us that do know that bend, especially on Sunday mornings, there are various vehicles that travel at speed. That sight line is not good, and I think until further information, and as mentioned by the officers, that we get the data on that, that I agree with officers' recommendations for me.
Thank you, Councillor Schwer. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, there seem to be at least three things going on with this site, which makes it a difficult decision in some ways, although I'll come on to say why I don't think it is a difficult decision. And that you've got development that's already started, and as the agent said, this is a retrospective application. They're asking for permission for something they've already started doing. Secondly, it's been before the local plan committee for allocation, and thirdly, we've got a planning application, so it is complicated. But further to what Councillor Ricky said, we often hear at local plan committee, and rightly so, that of course what we do when we allocate a site is quite a broad brush thing. It's basically a line around a piece of land with an indicative use. And that doesn't mean that whatever application comes forward for any number of caravans is acceptable. Which brings me to my first point. I think they're trying to do too much with this number of caravans. It is 12. You can see that on the plan, plus another building, and that is quite a lot for that area of land. So that's the first reason why I think the officers are correct in this instance to recommend refusal. The second reason is, which is quite rare for us to have an objection from the Highway Authority. And it's very clear, looking at the very clear photographs the officer presented, that one way is a little bit restricted, but the other way is really significantly restricted. And unless that can be overcome, we're duty bound as a planning authority to say that's not acceptable, because we have an obligation to make sure, via the recommendations from county, that the access is safe. So that's the second reason. And the third reason is ecology. I mean, it's disappointing to hear, yet again, on a site that, obviously this is coming from residents, but I've got no reason to disbelieve them, that clearance work had already started. But it's very clear what planning law says. If you have the suspicion or the actuality of protected species on or adjacent to a site, you are required as a planning authority to know what they are and how to mitigate them if you have to. If you can't do that, you can't take the application for determination. That's what the law says. It's very clear. So in this instance, I don't think, albeit as some have said, we've got to find the pitches, which we do. In this instance, I think we have to refuse, but perhaps something else might be possible on this site in a different configuration. But what's before us tonight, I've got no doubt we have to refuse it.
Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Jack, for your presentation. Could I just ask some clarification on something around biodiversity again? I think I know the answer to this, but I'm not sure. So the final speaker said that BNG did not apply because this was a retrospective application. Reason 5 for suggesting refusal is that it does apply because it's not submitted as retrospective. Is that because this is it is a new application for 6 pitches, whereas previously there have been applications for 4? Is that why we've got a discrepancy between what our officer's report says and what the speaker says about it being retrospective? Thank you.
It's not necessarily, no. It's so we haven't had an application for. It's been before a separate committee, but this is to retain the material change of use of land. Now, there are different moving parts on the application. There's a retrospective element in terms of the material change of use, and there's also 6 pictures which, when I visited the site, there weren't 6 pictures established at the site, and there's potentially, other works within the site area which may go on. So there's an element of it's a retrospective change of use. There are potentially prospective elements, and that is also formed in the basis of there's insufficient information with regards to, as we said, if the buildings need to go, if any other areas need to be provided as amenity areas, etc., which haven't been thus far. That could be a retrospective and a prospective, and we would need a baseline for those areas that are prospective.
Okay, thank you. I think, yeah, I've got that. So if they were to come back at any stage with anything else, one of the things they would have to do is to demonstrate 10% BNG. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak on this item? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one of the things that we're doing is we're talking about the importance of the Highways Authority's determination that there's clearly significant problems with this access. To me, that is so crystal clear. I can't see how it can be disputed. I know that road. That section of road is always constrained. As soon as you turn off the road coming out of Sybil Headingham, you're heading towards Weathersfield. That whole section of road is highly constrained. And this particular location, there is absolutely no way you can get an appropriate view, vision display, if you use the proper term, from that access looking towards Weathersfield. There is always, even without the permanent objects there are always parked vehicles, and some of them quite large quite often, on that section of road. I can't see that surmountable. So I have absolutely no qualms in supporting officer recommendation. There are other reasons that support my view, but the bottom line on it is I can't see that is surmountable, and for that reason alone, I think I wholeheartedly support officer recommendation. Thanks.
Okay, would anybody like to move officer recommendation?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'm happy to move refusal on this occasion. Thank you.
Seconder, Councillor Ritchie. All those in favour of refusing this application? That is actually unanimous. Thank you, members. So we'll just wait for everyone to leave. Who's leaving? And also Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Bowers are also going to step out for this one. Right, so we'll now move on to the next item on our agenda. This is item 5C, which is page 100. Oh, sorry, Councillor Beavis, I'd forgotten about you. Right, so the next item on our agenda, item 5C, this is application number 25 /01920, section 106A. It's at Braintree Village, Charterway, Braintree, and it is to be found on page 117 of your agenda. We don't. Oh, this counts. No. Thank you. Councillor Staines, you are speaking on this item. Would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening on this topic. In my outline submission, I asked how much will be saved by the developer from this proposed service reduction. And I asked, has BDC asked the developer to use any savings to contribute to support public transport in the district? If the committee approved the officer recommendation to reduce the S106 contribution, then this would be an example where BDC chooses not to secure a full developer contribution, and that could be to the detriment of residents. Public buses in and around the town from the wider North Zone are underfunded and have a low public confidence level, and this S106 money is already included in the Land Security's business case for this development and could, with their agreement, be redeployed to reduce taxpayer subsidy and improve the public bus services in the area, and this would benefit the wider social and economic activity and increase footfall to Braintree Village, the developer, and Braintree Town. Or the savings to the developer could instead, and again with their agreement, be spent on essential aspects of maintaining or enhancing the attractiveness of Braintree Town Centre, such as subsidising parking. Parking at Braintree Village is free. Or any combination of new measures aligned to the S106 goal, which was to mitigate the known challenge of Braintree Village's retail, food and leisure offer, overwhelming and undermining the town centre. Creatively using all of the available S106 budget available. So BDC has had to make a substantial council taxpayer investment in Braintree Town to help close the widening gap between Braintree Village and Braintree Town. In summary, I think there is much more work to do in this case to optimise the available S106 budget to mitigate ongoing impact to the town centre from the development before returning to this committee with a full, newly costed proposal. As part of that discussion, the developer could share what it would do with the saving if this committee approved a reduction from its current obligation. It would be deeply problematic if some or all of that saving was added to the company's donation to the Conservative Party, as Land Securities is noted to be one of that party's largest donors. Thank you.
Bit surprised, but last comment, Councillor Staines. The presentation is going to be given by Ali. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second application I'm presenting to you this evening is in relation to a modification to an existing Section 106 obligation at Braintree Village Shopping Centre. The modification relates to the 6th schedule of the Section 106 agreement, which again relates to the frequency of the shuttle bus service. Braintree Village is a large outlet shopping centre located in the southeastern area of the town. The site consists of the shopping village itself, which contains a wide range of retail units, plus restaurants, an internal road and pedestrian network, and a large car park located immediately adjacent. The site as a whole sits next to Braintree Retail Park, which contains further stores, restaurants, a cinema and a swimming pool. The two, however, are operated independently. The original Braintree Village planning consent was accompanied by a Section 106 agreement in 1998. The 6th schedule of this agreement requires the provision of a free shuttle bus service from the village to Braintree Town Centre and vice versa. This was not a financial contribution for the developer to pay the council. This is a shuttle bus that they agreed to provide. This service was operating for a number of years before it ceased during COVID and has not recommenced. The precise requirements of the Section 106 include a shuttle bus with a seating capacity minimum of 31 seats, which runs at least every 15 minutes. The service was to be a free service with 2 liveried buses available at all times unless agreed with the council. The Section 106 does also state that in the event of a lack of demand for the service, the council will not unreasonably withhold consent for a reduced level of service provision. It also states that any proposed amendments must first be agreed by the consultative committee, which includes representatives from the district and county councils, the retail developer and the Braintree Chamber of Trade or Town Centre Strategy Group. The shuttle bus link was specified to run from Braintree Town Centre to Braintree Village with 2 stops in between. When assessing the acceptability or otherwise of a proposal to modify an existing Section 106 obligation attached to a planning permission, it's necessary to consider the proposal against the statutory tests set out in the Regulation 122 of the SIL regulations. The SIL regulations require that any planning obligation imposed on a development is firstly necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. It needs to be directly related to the development, and thirdly, fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. Since the obligation was originally imposed over 27 years ago, and when assessed against the SIL test today with regards to the first test, which is necessary to make the development acceptable, officers consider that the general principle of a shuttle bus service remains necessary. The need for a sustainable transport link to and from the town centre has not changed, and it is important that the two shopping areas remain connected. However, officers do not consider that the original very high level of service provision for the shuttle bus in the original obligation can still be considered to be necessary to make the shopping village acceptable in planning terms. Provided that robust linkage is maintained, a lower frequency of service is a reasonable proposition. Officers consider that the second test is met for both the existing obligation and the proposed modified obligation, and the shuttle bus requirement as a general principle is directly related to the shopping village development. The final SIL test states that any obligation must be fairly and reasonably related in kind and scale to the development. This is where the type and frequency of the shuttle bus service must be considered. The original obligation requires a very high level of service provision with a minimum of 31-seat bus running every 15 minutes at all times when the shopping village is open to the public. This generates a very high level of service provision with an almost continuous shuttle service running throughout the day. Officers do not consider that this meets the test of being fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the shopping village development, nor that it could in any way be justified in planning terms under the modern day planning system. The revised proposal would see an on-demand bus service being provided 3 times a day. This has the advantage of eliminating the potential for unsustainable empty vehicle runs and reducing the likelihood for almost empty vehicle runs occurring. The proposed amendments for on-demand free service 3 times a day from 10 a.m., 10 a.m., 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. with 3 bookable round trips per day, with each occurring over an approximately 30-minute period. It will be one bus, so essentially the minibus would leave on the hour at 10 a.m, for example, from the bus interchange in Braintree Town Centre, travelling roughly 7 to 10 minutes, and then return from Braintree Village at around 1/4 the hour back to the bus interchange in Braintree Town Centre. The service would consist of an electric 16-seater minibus which runs 7 days a week, excluding bank holidays and Christmas Day, with a further mechanism for minor changes to be granted if appropriate. Should the frequency need amending due to demand, the frequency can be amended should it need to be due to demand. The proposed frequency proposed here has been approved by the consulting committee as per the existing Section 106. Overall, it's considered that while the original planning obligation no longer meets the required SIL tests, the proposed modified obligation would do, and that there is also a clear planning policy basis for this. The revised shuttle bus timetable would be a far more reasonable obligation, sustainable, and will ensure a free shuttle bus will remain. Therefore, it is recommended that the application to amend the existing Section 106 agreement is approved, and that officers are authorised to proceed to work with the Council's appointed solicitor to secure modifications to the Section 106. A slight revision has been made to the recommendation to ascertain the frequency and location of the shuttle bus service. The modified agreement would also need a mechanism to allow a revised shuttle bus provision package to be submitted, and if appropriate, approved under delegated authority, if, for example, a different bus provider with a slightly larger bus or slightly different bus times were utilised in the future. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm just going to ask Chris to come back on the points made by Councillor Staines as to the Section 106.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just to clarify a couple of points, members of this committee will be very aware. So obviously this is an application that's before us, that's been submitted by the applicant. Members' role this evening is to consider the proposal before you, not consider alternative options that could come forward. The applicant's been very clear in putting forward a proposal, and the merits of those proposals is what you need to debate this evening. There was reference to a 106 budget, so as Alison's clarified, in this particular case this is an obligation on Braintree Village, previously Braintree Freeport, to provide this service. This is not a public transport contribution, this is not a part of Section 106 money, this is an obligation on the developer, Braintree Freeport as it was, Braintree Village, to provide this service. Alison's very clearly explained the SIL tests that we must be guided by when considering obligations, and we've obviously undertaken that assessment in relation to the current provisions and what's proposed and come to that determination. But I just want to be absolutely clear, that this is not a case where there is a pot of 106 money where we are considering different options for how that money could be spent. It is a proposal to vary the terms of the service that is secured within the current Section 106 agreement, and the committee must decide this evening whether or not that is acceptable or not in planning terms, and whether or not that's acceptable against the SIL tests that have been outlined. Hopefully that helps, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That really does help. Councillor Bass-Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm sorry, Ali, but I am going to bombard you with questions because I think I may have been the only councillor here when this was originally granted planning permission. I think I might have been. And Councillor Mann would never forgive me if I didn't ask these questions as well, I'm sure. So why has it taken 5.5 years to get to this stage? Due to the length of time, what enforcement has taken place between the cessation of the service and this decision? What data has been provided to this authority to back up what demand there is and that proposal fits in with that currently? Any mechanism to allow a revised shuttle bus provision package to be submitted should return to Planning Committee and not decided under delegated authority. Would a revised provision need the approval of the Consultative Committee in the first instance, in line with the original Section 106? Will there be any review or monitoring of the demand going forward, or is it just on the applicant to submit any revised provision package? What happens to patrons arriving on the 2 p.m. shuttle bus, as there would be no return at such an early time of day? And are they expected to walk back to the town centre or pay for transport? And if this is agreed tonight, when will the revised service commence? And I'm sorry about bombarding you with questions, but I was here originally and I remember very clearly why that was there. And I know very clearly in my head why that was stopped, not just because of COVID. And I think we need to be very clear here why that service originally was there. Thank you.
Would you like to come back on all those questions, Ali? I think Chris has been taking a note.
Yes, I hope so. Councillor Bass-Flynn, I'll be completely honest here. This isn't actually my application. I didn't write this. I'm doing this for Tim. So hopefully Chris and I can try and answer some of your questions as we're going through them. So I think the first one we said, why has it taken 5.5 years to get to this position? That wasn't covered off in the report. Have you got any understanding, Chris?
I think, Councillor Bass-Flynn, I haven't been directly involved in these conversations myself, but I am aware that they have taken place over an extended period of time at quite a senior level as well. And it's obviously taken quite a long time to get to this particular position. It's linked with the second question, which I think you asked, which was in relation to enforcement, and I can confirm, so no enforcement action has been taken because we're talking about a Section 106 agreement here, would be talking about going effectively through the High Court to seek to injunct and to enforce that agreement. But yeah, I can confirm no enforcement action has been taken. My understanding is there's been quite frequent discussions over this provision, but it's taken some time. I can't give you a full explanation, I'm afraid, this evening as to exactly when those discussions have taken place and the extent to them, but I know they have taken place. I'll come back to you, if I may, on the data, which I think was your third question. In terms of any revised proposals and whether or not it's considered under delegated or powers, or whether or not it comes to planning committee, that's something that effectively is determined through the current scheme of delegation. So for section 106A applications, so any application to vary or modify a section 106 agreement, the default position, as with most applications to vary an application, so what we call a section 73 application, it would be it would default to being a delegated decision. However, this is where if there is a significant level of interest or there is a significant deviation from the intent of the section 106 agreement, we as officers would report that to planning committee. So I think all I can say obviously this evening is we hear the comment. If there were future revisions, if this was agreed this evening and there were future revisions, we'd have to still go through the same process of the consultative committee in terms of consultation as a first point of call, but then depending on the level of interest in the extent of the change, and obviously the reason this is being brought this evening is because of the extent of the change to the section 106 agreement. That's when, in terms of the start date for the recommencement of that service, to make that absolutely clear. So I don't know if those comments are helpful, Councillor Bowers-Flint, but hopefully that's covered most of the points.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Apologies for bombarding, but it's just important questions. And there are people in this town and surrounding villages who ask on a frequent basis, when is that bus service going to commence? And I think they are genuinely important points that I've just raised about that whole service and why it was there. And let's not get away from the fact, although it may not be a planning reason, but let's not get away from the fact that the people who actually pay for that service are the people who rent the business properties in the centre. Thank you.
I think the next person is Councillor Finken, I think.
So many questions have been asked. It's difficult to think any new ones. I think the main thing really is the drastic reduction in the service. To be only 3 times a day, and as Councillor Bowers-Flint has said, one of them you have to go back at 2:15 when the centre is open, certainly until late afternoon, seems a particularly poor arrangement. Also, it's a bookable service, and I can imagine that might be quite limited in the response that you're going to get. And I would particularly endorse Councillor Bowers-Flint's point about the lack of research and data that we've been given to be able to make a decision. We don't know what the customers think, what the clients think, whether they're going to use the service or not. I think we need to do some proper research before we agree to this. And I would suggest deferral and coming back with a much more detailed proposal, more conditions placed on the developer, on the proposer, and something which is much more customer orientated than the present proposal seems to be.
I think Councillor Diamond had on my list next.
Thank you. I'll be brief, as the 2 previous councillors have covered most of what I wanted to say. I understand there needed to be change every 15 minutes with a 31-seat bus was over the top, but we have, I think, gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. My worry is that 3 buses for 10, 12 and 2, I'm not quite sure how many people that would even serve. What if you're a working person? What if you're a busy person, you don't want to be there for 2 hours? My worry is it will become so useless as a service that people will stop using it altogether, and then it would just stop being. It's like when you have a service, you reduce it and reduce it and reduce it, and then people stop using it, and then it just disappears.
Nobody used it, so we'll just get rid of it.
So I do definitely think there needs to be change, but I don't think this change is appropriate or services the needs of local people. Therefore, I agree. I think deferral is the best option at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hooks, I have you next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was very disappointed when I saw this proposal come before us. Equally, like Councillor Diamond, what we had before, every 15 minutes with a whole full-seater bus is not viable in this day and age. But 10, 12 and 2 is not viable either. It's not enough. the 2 p.m. one being at least 3 hours before closure is not ideal for the workers, the shoppers, anybody going to ice skate at Christmas or the other thing they're heading at summer holidays. It's just not going to be viable. My other concern is the bookable way of doing this. Coming from a ward that is serviced by, I believe, the company that might be running this, is an issue with many of my residents in the way how it's run and how in advance they have to book to try and get a spot. Is that going to have the same problems as the normal day-to-day service that it runs, or will it be different for this? So that would be my other concern. Also, you mentioned in the report or in the presentation that previously there were another 2 stops between Braintree Town Centre and Braintree Village. I'm guessing those 2 stops are not going to be serviced on this new route, for want of a better word. But basically, yes, I'm really disappointed with this proposal, and I think we can do a lot better to serve our town. That's obviously, our town centre does struggle, and we do need to make it a whole lot better than what we've got here tonight. Thank you.
So, Councillor Abbott, I have you next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think this speaks to a couple of items we discussed last night, actually. One is a member who I won't name, but you all heard him talking about diesel-powered buses. Well, this is an electric-powered bus. We have moved on from diesel-powered buses and steam engines and all that. And the second thing is what Councillor Bowers-Flint was talking about. I became a member just after this went through in 1999, but I was involved with trying to save some orchids on the site, so that was I'm making a nuisance of myself, but I think justifiably so. I believe the orchids were rehoused somewhere. But I'm not happy with this either, and I think deferral probably would be the best thing. I simply can't understand why the buses would stop at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That does make no sense at all. You'd need to go to at least 4 or 5 o'clock. The second thing, as Councillor Hook said, why bookable? I mean, surely just run it. Just run a service. And the third thing is the way this also speaks to another thing we discussed last night, is the way in which we're actually going away from the sustainability agenda. Car dependency is becoming more ingrained, and in that part of town, I represent up to Galleys Corner and slightly beyond. I mean, that's a traffic nightmare, that whole area. We need to be doing whatever we can to support public transport and buses. So, whilst accepting, I think, the point that the initial service was gold-plated, perhaps we can still have silver-plated, something still worthwhile, but this isn't it. So I think I would certainly support deferral.
Councillor Monday.
I'm not going to repeat all of the things from other members, but it just doesn't seem logical to me to have a bus service that starts at 10, drops off at 10:15, comes back again, and then sits there for 90 minutes doing nothing. Presumably you're paying the bus driver, you've got a resource sitting there doing nothing. You could at least do it once an hour, for instance, and that would be a little bit more acceptable, and therefore you could have a service at 4 o'clock at least to run people back. It's just completely logical, unworkable, and I would support deferral until we get something better.
Thank you. Next I have Councillor Beavis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would concur with many of the comments already made this evening. I wasn't around when the application was taken at this council, but I do remember as a young person it being built and having the wow factor. Actually, I think it still has got the wow factor. And I think we've got an obligation before us as a committee to get this absolutely right, because it feels to me as if the report this evening, it just feels to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, a little bit rushed and a little bit waited to go wrong. And I feel that if we went ahead as proposed, it would almost close it down, because the operation I don't think would work. I think there are flaws in the report as well. There's a line here that it really irritates me actually, where it says it speaks of the retail centre and then Braintree Village as we now know it, and that they run independently. Well, they do, but they don't. We all understand they're different, but we're going to have to do something, because I'm sure I'm not the only member. Actually, very shortly I'm going to have to stop going in because I'm not going to get there and you're not going to park. But even on most Saturday afternoons, you can spend, and I kid you not, a good 45 minutes trying to find a parking space. And we've added to that, and it's not getting any better. It is absolutely horrendous, horrendous. And if this is to be our wow factor going on, then we've got to do something. And if we don't get this right, it's not going to get better, it's going to get far worse. I absolutely agree with the on-hour service. I do think this is going to have to be monitored, and I do think there needs to be some proper consultation. Not, you know, and we're going to have to find some places to put this, particularly our young people. Do you know what? It gives me absolute delight when I watch young people use. It just does, and they've got a right, a real right, to be able to enjoy that space and that place, and it's got to really work for our young people. Just in summary of all of that, I don't think it should be on demand. The service should run. It should just run, and then you go along and hop on your bus. It's written to go wrong, and that's really my irritation with it this evening. So I would support a deferral, but I would also support a report coming back that's just more common sense, and that's not detrimental to what the officers have done. I think it's the first stab of a draft for us to consider, and I think we have considered it, and it's not for us tonight. That's how I feel. Thank you.
Councillor Spray is next.
Thank you, Chairman. This follows protracted, they really have been protracted discussions between the applicant and the consultative committee. It's been going on for what feels like forever. So when I saw this coming up on the agenda, I was really relieved. I thought, good, at last we got somewhere with this. So it is disappointing to see the gaps in it for all the reasons that colleagues around the table here have discussed. Not least a 2 p.m. bus, but with no apparent return time. I'm not sure how on earth that's supposed to work. But can I just ask one other question? Under the recommendations, it's up on the screen, the last one says, a mechanism for the consideration of future revisions to the shuttle bus service. Does that mean, as well, because this works both ways, if demand exceeds expectations, because it might do, does that mean that the service has the potential to be increased? And there were not, because the implication is there that, well, we can always take it down even further if we don't think there's enough demand. But this may well prove to be really popular if we get this right. So does that mean it could be increased as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spray, for the question. So in theory, it could. However, the purpose of that provision, I think, is essentially rather than having to make a formal application to vary the Section 106 agreement in the same way that a developer or an applicant can submit information to discharge an obligation or a condition, it would effectively follow that route. But again, it would be applicant-led. I think this is where the comment which was made by Councillor Bowers-Flint around monitoring, where there is no provision there, and maybe that's a point I will take back with the team. But that's the type of thing that would have to be built in, that there is some evidential element in terms of revisiting the provision. So in theory, you're right, there could be an application to increase the level of service. I think the intent would be around making future changes to change potentially the times or so forth without having to make a completely fresh application and go through the same process. So that was, I think, the purpose of that last bullet point there in the recommendation.
Finally, Councillor Schwer, I come to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'll try and not repeat a lot of all the good points that have been made, but it's going to be quite difficult speaking on this at the last. I think the important points, I agree with all the comments, especially about with electric buses and sustainability, but also I think over and above this, there's a reputational issue here. There's also a tourist issue. There's also a commercial issue, because this is more than just a bus. This is actually keeping people employed and keeping the sites going. And we haven't mentioned that because we've just been talking about a bus service, but this is a lot more. This is actually more than what we were talking about. Well, you were all talking, I didn't mention it, but the importance of community. And this is a very link from Braintree town centre to Braintree village. So it helps also getting people from a point of view of employment about. It can help with over-congested parking. And don't forget, we're actually holding some events now at Braintree Village, like in the winter ice skate ring and that, to encourage people up. So I think all of that needs to be taken into consideration. And of course, it would be ideal to have a bus on the hour, every hour, going while it's open backwards and forwards, that's sustainable. So I think there's all those other aspects to be taken into account, because once that bus service stops, or we don't have those community links, because remember it's two-way, it's also helping the actual high street and the town centre of Braintree life as well. So we've got to balance that. We can't just consider this in isolation. So it's really important to think of this, to go back and say, and I hope my understanding is from the comments it's going to be deferred, but go back, and this is much, much bigger than just a shuttle bus service. This has got the lifeblood of Braintree in it. It's got the commercial aspect, it's got the reputational aspect, and once we lose that reputation and it goes out, it can have ripples that will go way beyond Essex. So I ask you to think about that. Thank you.
Councillor Hooks, and I'm just going to make a quick comment myself after.
Sorry, just one thought, and excuse my ignorance because I can't remember the opening times, but it used to have a late night on a Thursday. It doesn't have anymore, because I was going to say if it does, that needs to be taken into account, but it is till 6 o'clock. Okay, thank you.
The only other comment that I wanted to make is that that there are, I think, a lot of young people who actually work at Freeport, and some of them they may come by bus, say from Sybil Hedingham to the bus station, and then can't get from the bus station to Freeport. Councillor Basley.
Very quickly, and you're right there, Madam Chairman, the young people will be the bigger users of it. But just to, Councillor Schweer has just reminded me, go back to the original application, and the reason that this was put on there with the Section 106 was because the traders in the town were concerned that they would lose business to Freeport as it was then. And that was part of the agreement, so people could move between the town and the village. Not to give them everything, but it was to share so that everybody could do it. And if we go on the basis, and obviously I live and breathe it every single day, of the queuing, especially at weekends on a Saturday and Sunday, when Councillor Beavers has said it takes 45 minutes to get in there, this would encourage people to use the town, because they could park their cars in the car park in the town, get on the shuttle bus, do their shopping there and come back to the town, or the other way round. That could happen. But we mustn't get away from the original reason that this was put there in the first place, which I think Braintree Village might have done.
Well, I think Chris has taken lots of notes of everything that everybody has said. So I get the feeling that you would like to, somebody would like to move deferring. So Councillor Finken move deferral, Councillor Abbott seconded. All those in favour of deferral? Yes, that is unanimous. Thank you, members. Right. Now, we are now going to... Oh yes, Councillor... That's right, Councillor Abbott is Councillor Abbott is leaving for this application. And so the next application is a an NSIP, which I've forgotten actually what that stands for, but anyway.
Nationally significant infrastructure
Nationally
project.
significant infrastructure project. Thanks, Councillor Holland. So this is item 6A on your agenda. This is application number 24/721, PPA, Norwich to Tilbury NSIP. And I've just will remind members that Councillor Spray is sort of going to be sitting here really as an observer, having taken advice from governance, and will not participate in the debate or vote. And I think Matt is going to do the presentation, is going to explain why this is coming before this committee for comment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. So the presentation before you this evening is going to give you a whistle-stop tour of the Norwich to Tilbury Nationally Significant Infrastructure Project, otherwise called an NSIP. And that is for a new electricity line of approximately 180 kilometres from the Norwich main substation to the Tilbury North substation. So a little bit of text first. It's mostly images, you'll be pleased to know. But just to re-emphasise that the purpose of bringing it before members this evening is to make any, for members to make any observations or to highlight any concerns that they wish that the Cabinet Member, Councillor Spray, to be aware of and consider when we put forward our local impact report and relevant representations to the Planning Inspectorate. And this presentation will essentially supplement some of those details in the committee report. And just to confirm, as a host authority, we are not a decision maker. We are essentially a consultee in the process. So we set out what the impacts are in our district, and that is then taken into consideration by the Planning Inspectorate and then the Secretary of State, which I think is Ed Miliband at the moment. The actual proposal in Braintree is about 15 kilometres of the line, of the new line. And across the whole route and in Braintree, the proposal is 50-metre high lattice pylons, but there are some instances on the grounding, such as in the Dedham Vale National Landscape and a very small section in our district. And like all NSIPs, the application's been submitted with an environmental impact assessment, so that talks about lots of different things, lots of different topics. And that obviously is what, in theory, sets out the impact of the development. That's what our consultees will look at when obviously preparing the report. So with all that said, so the whole route first. So Norwich is just to the top of the image. It runs in the south direction, goes into Bramford substation, which is around here, and then goes underground. As you can see, the slight change in the line colour into Tendring, where the new interconnector substation would be, and then back out over ground to the north of Colchester, and then across our district to the north of Chelmsford, and in between Basildon and Brentwood, and then finally at Tilbury. And I'll just include a couple of examples. You've no doubt seen an overhead pylon. With the underground cables, that's what they look like when they're not buried. Normally they'll be then buried with a sort of grass strip on the top. So what I've done for the ease of members' reference, rather than using the plans, which are very specific and very zoned in, I've sort of zoomed out. I've used the interactive map that's been updated on the National Grid website to basically show you what the proposals are. So in terms of where it is at the moment, you can see it crosses the A120 and then by Sorrocks, goes sort of north of Fearing and south of Coggeshall Hamlet, to the north of Rivenhall but south of Silver End, to the south of White Notley and north of Thorpebourne and Fairstead, and finally north of Fuller Street. And then it comes out where this sort of green area is. That's sort of pretty much the end of our district and where it goes into Chelmsford. And
So what I've done is to try and make it as easy as possible to see what's actually proposed. I've broken it up into 3 sections. So this is the first one, the SAR interfering. I've included the legend on this slide just for members' reference, not on all the slides because there wasn't enough space, but I'll pick out some of the key ones just so we know what we're looking at. So the purple dots are the pylons. The lines in between are the actual electricity cables themselves. This green is the I think it's 16132 or lower voltage power line that's operated by UK Power Networks. That would be undergrounded in that part to make way for the 400 kilovolt line. Then you've got the listed buildings, which are sort of the green triangles. There's a couple of red and yellow ones as well, which are also listed buildings of a higher status. You've got the public rights of way marked out, which is the sort of the purple dotted lines. And the yellow hatched areas are just the conservation areas. So, and importantly, the red line is essentially what they call the order limits. And with limits of deviation, in theory, those pylons and that route could go anywhere within that red line. So while they will look at the impacts, they look at the impacts as a whole, they've obviously put their pen to paper and said this is where we think it could go, but that alignment may well change within those order limits, within that red line. Okay, so the submission helpfully includes some visualisations. So at the top of this screen you'll see the existing baseline image, and then at the bottom of the screen you'll see where they've superimposed some pylons on there of the approximate route of the proposals at the moment. And then if you look at the map on the right hand side, it says 2 different views. This particular image is the view 315, so it's about 1 kilometre to the nearest structure in terms of distance. So applying that, I've taken on quite a few visualisations which I think sort of give you a flavour of the impact that obviously this is going to have on our district. Again, you've got the sort of existing image at the top and the superimposed image at the bottom. Notably, this image is from sort of below Cockleshall Hamlet, a view 145, so it's looking quite close, only 0.43 kilometres to the nearest structure. And then moving on to the next, say the second stage, if you like, of my maps. So continuation on Paintings Lane goes across there, and then it crosses under to the south of Silver End there. You've got notably you've got Cressing Temple over here, which I've sort of marked out as obviously one of the very important places in our district. I've included one image, well actually my own site photographs from just outside Rivenhall Place and from Church Road. So this wasn't actually captured in the visualisations, so they didn't have any superimposed images unfortunately. So I've included my own images from my own site visit for members' reference. You can see the different colours of the blue is looking east direction and the red is looking in the sort of like the westerly direction. And I've also included a picture of the tree known as Henry as well in the top right. A couple more visualisations in this area. So this is a public right of way 108_15 to the south of Silver End. So you can see again the pylons are quite close in this location, about 0.4 kilometres away. I've actually included both visualisations on this particular image on this view, because this is relating to Cressing Temple. So this is just below Cressing Temple, so if you can see it's over here, so Cressing Temple is just here, so it's a little bit to the side and below. This first one is view 110, which shows you can see the pylons sort of from a distance about 0.78 kilometres away, or what they might look like. And again, in the other view, so the 200s are looking sort of in the more westerly, southwesterly direction. If you were to draw a line like down the middle, that's where it's kind of looking in that frame, 90-degree frame. And again, you can see how the pylons go across, where there obviously is none at the moment. And you can also see that there is the visitor centre as well, for Crescent Temple. Finally, Great Leys. So this is the stretch north of Thorpe Fairstead and Fuller Street, and then, as I said earlier, our district kind of ends around here. And again, this hatch green line is where they're proposing to underground one of the lower voltage lines to then make way for the high voltage 400 kilovolt line. Notably, in this section is the undergrounding in our district, which is limited to 0.2 kilometres. And is only put forward for functional reasons because the line has to go underground an existing 400 kilovolt line, which is the Rayleigh to Pelham line, Pelham to Rayleigh. So that one, in this case, this is being undergrounded rather than the other way around. And to do that, it will need two cable sealing end compounds. Bit of a mouthful, but I'll show you what they look like as well shortly. Again, a couple more visualisations. One from White Notley. Again, this one is V155, 0.63 kilometres away from the nearest structure. And you've got this one, which is from Festival Road. And it's V45 looking back across. And the approximate location of the cable sealing compound is down here. And you can see actually in this image that you can see the existing 400 kilovolt line. And in the bottom image you can actually see that there is then the superimposed line. So in this particular view, if the Norwich Utility proposals were to be approved, then you'd see two pylons in your view. Two like side by side across the route, not just two pylons. If that makes sense. And then again, it's the same sort of situation with this one, east of Ranks Green, near Blix's Farm. That view there. I've looked at view 105, which again kind of looks back at the proposal to the east southeast, and again there'd be the two lines. So cable sealing end compounds are basically where the overhead line go to a gantry, which is here, and they go into the gantry and they go into these sort of modular conductors, and essentially then that is where they then go underground and go to the other cable sealing end compound where they then go above ground. So the image on the left is basically like a top-down view of how that works, but it doesn't really show much that I could understand particularly. So what I've done is included an example image of what one might look like on the top right, so you get an idea. And the section down below is actually what they've submitted with the DCO. So the gantry is about 13 metres high, and the rest of it is about 8 metres. And then from my own site visit, it's the actual location is within one field. I've taken two images, one looking back across, so one cable sealing compound would be sort of around this location, and then the other one would be sort of just forward of the tree line here. The field is actually, to be fair, the field is actually quite self-contained from Fairstead Road. It is elevated, so there wouldn't be much view across, but there is a public right of way which runs alongside up here, so that obviously will be highly visible from that, subject to some screening which will be put in. And then there's no real public right of way which runs the other side, so you wouldn't see this particular one as much. And you'll note that there's someone doing, I think they're doing archaeological trial trenching at the time I went down there. So, please note the last slide. So the purpose of bringing to committee, again, it's just for members to make observations or highlight any concerns that they want Councillor Spray to be aware of. Yeah, so we have to think about, so the key things are the impacts, and I've talked about those environmental impact assessment topics like landscape and visual, contaminated land, soils, historic environment, so all things that have been scoped in, mitigation and compensation, like new planting, like mitigation planting, but biodiversity net gain, but also one of the things that's not in the report, which I've subsequently learned, is that they're seeking to, as part of mitigation, provide a replacement for every loss of one tree to plant 3 trees. And they estimate that there would be about 10,000 trees that would be lost as part of this proposal. So that would, in theory, mean there would be 30,000 trees replanted, albeit, obviously, there's no, well, at the moment, there's nothing how that would actually happen and where that would be. So I think for officers, we'd want to see that replacement, any loss in our district, to be replaced in our district. But those discussions still have to take place. The need for the actual project itself, the underlying policies as well, which are really important, which are different to what we normally consider as part of the local plan, and obviously the alternatives to to what's been proposed. So yes, that's it from me. I'll happily try and answer any questions. Can't make any promises. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So we're really commenting on the local impact report that's going to be submitted. Councillor Bevis, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on the point of the double pylon. I've not really seen that before, something like that. And I always remember when we were going through the old consultation of the Twinstead to Bramford, they were taking out a line when they were putting a new line through because of the impact. And I just wondered why they're double lining it, if that's what they're doing.
So, sorry, Councillor Beaver. So they're not double lining it in the sense that there's going to be 2 new lines. There's one existing 400 kilovolt line, the Pelham to Rayleigh line. This will be a new line in addition to that line. And in Bradford to Twinstead, what they did is there are certain parts of the route, not in our district, but there was the existing 400 kilovolt line, and there was a 132 kilovolt line, and they were removing the 132 to put a new 400 kilovolt line. So there still would have been 2 in the Baby district. Hopefully that helps clarify for you.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to go through the presentation, if people bear with me, because I think that in some respects it understates the visual impact, potential visual impact. And I'm basing this on what I've learned from being involved in the Bramford to Twinstead project since 2009 until today. And so my comments today are informed by that experience, and that comes right up to now in terms of impacts and the way National Grid work in delivering one of these things. And in all of this, I want to preface this by saying I in no way am trying to stand against the timely delivery of this project. This is about how it gets done and whether we understand accurately what's coming down the track for us. So if we go back to, I think it's Matt's first illustration, which is the whole route with 2 photographs. And I'd like to invite Matt, the upper photograph is of a current day maximum capacity 2-circuit 400 kilovolt system. So if you look at either side of the pylon, you've got bundles of 3 conductors and 3 of those. And what that results in, when they go underground, that's going to require 18 underground cables. And 18 underground cables running, and this is This is going to be as high a capacity as anything in the country. This is really seriously important. That's going to require 18 cables and probably a 50-metre wide swathe to install them. And the reason you have to do that is because you've got to control the temperature of those cables. So you've got to make sure they're spaced enough not to get any electrical or electromagnetic interaction, but also, because it's AC, but also the cooling of it. So I would invite officers to comment on whether they think that perhaps in light of that, the second photograph, which I'm not sure is even in the British Isles, judging by the pylon designs, slightly understates the situation, what we can expect. And moving forward through the presentation, this is not to be critical, by the way, this is about just making sure we've got this right. One of the things I would say is there are plenty of places in the district where existing 400 kilovolt systems are far more in people's faces than the visualizations quite rightly suggest inside this. So I in no way question any of that. But where it really gets interesting is in things like the cable sealing end compounds, where you take the new system underneath an existing 400 kilovolt system. Now we've got examples of that in the district. If anybody's as anal as me, I can show you. But what we know about this is a much bigger deal. So the photograph, top right of the illustration, I'm looking at the Matt's slide of the sealing end compound. This is all going into one field, 2.2 of a kilometre apart. There will be two pylons, 0.2 of a kilometre apart. Normally there are 3 pylons to a kilometre. Please challenge me if I'm wrong in any of this, because I'm not perfect. So the picture at the top right, a 13-foot high gantry is pretty easily seen in the countryside. If you don't believe me, drive down the A131, because National Grid have just installed one at Twinstead. So, and the photograph does not include one of those gantries at all. So the visual impact is greater than the photograph suggests. And to add to that, you've also got, in close proximity to that, 2 50-metre tall pylons, one for each sealing end compound. So the cumulative visual impact of that, which we haven't got an image for, is actually pretty high, and the level of work that's going to go into delivering it is also going to be great. We're going to see plenty of sign of this, because in my ward we've got a couple of kilometres of this going in. So it's quite important that when we discuss this, we truly understand what we're looking at. So if I can turn from that to, it's very easy not to fully comprehend the impact of this happening on the communities that we represent. And in order to be able to put this stuff in place, they will need access roads and goodness knows what else. The access roads alone involve quite high levels of hedgerow removal, because National Grid are not given to under-engineering things. So, as I'm sure Councillor Schweer will know, because it's near him, there's a socket great lump of hedgerow now missing from the A131 in his ward, I believe. And so the impact during the delivery of the project are great. And the impacts of this project, to my mind, fall into 2 groups. One is in the delivery of it, the other one is the permanent, some would argue, disfigurement of the countryside by these alien structures, which are way taller than any trees ever are. And that's an important point in its own right. You might not be able to see this bushing that's in the photograph of the sealing end compound, but you'll see the rest of it over the treescape. And when they're delivering that, National Grid, and this is based on what they're doing right now, National Grid will adhere to the rules, in my experience, to the letter. But that's not necessarily great. Let me give you a local example from the last week. National Grid sent out letters to the residents in my ward in a place called Lamarsh, telling them they were going to close the road in order to remove some hedgerow for an access track, a haul road. And they didn't close the road. What they were going to have to do was control the traffic. And they gave the county council, as I understand it, the minimum amount of notification that they were going to do this. They were not applying for a complete road closure. So the letters that went out to the local community were inaccurate, and the notification on the One Causeway website, which tells us all about, allows us to plan our routes. Kind of important out where I live. It's not like down here. We have tiny little lanes. A lot of them are protected. Very challenging anyway. When they close a road, it makes a big difference to us and causes all sorts of issues. So we need to know about this. And National Grid's actions in giving the minimum stipulated amount of notice to the community is hugely problematic in such areas. And this development is going to take place predominantly in rural places. And it's our rural residents that will be most affected, in my belief. And so the reason I'm saying all of this about this particular issue is we must understand how they operate, and we need, as in this authority, to go beyond asking them to obey the rules that everybody else should be obeying. We need them to take their community engagement and community relations aspect of this project appropriately seriously, and make sure that the communities that are being affected by it are given a sensible amount of notice in order to be able to plan routes, for example. This is just one example. The other thing I would say to you is that we need to encourage National Grid and their contractors, Balfour Beatty, etc., to enter into the spirit of planning regulations as well as obeying the letter of it. And let me give you an example there. They're building a substation which this authority consented out at Twinstead, and for months they had this substation is between two areas of ancient woodland, and for months that site was floodlit day and night, believe it or not. The whole thing is about 7 acres adjacent to ancient woodland with nocturnal creatures. I know they're there because I've seen them, at least they were. And this is hugely detrimental. So what I'm talking about here in both instances is we must properly understand, probably based on the experience this area will gain from the Bramford to Twinstead project, and apply that knowledge to the way we respond to the Norwich to Tilbury one. And what we know is that they will obey the rules, but one might argue they're pushing the boundaries or not being as helpful to the local communities and the environment as they might be. So we must impress upon them that our expectation, in my view, is that they will make sure they operate so the disruption this causes to local communities and to the environment is minimised during the delivery of the project. And with that, you'll be grateful to know that I'm going to be quiet. But I hope the committee find that useful.
Councillor Ritchie, did you want to speak?
Yeah, just very, very briefly. I think we've got enough context there for Councillor Spray to take away, to hopefully get some of those concerns highlighted, so that as part of any proposal for the routing through the Braintree district, those concerns are picked up. I will just say, obviously, there is a need. We do have an energy and infrastructure issue that urgently needs to be addressed. So the principle of being able to supply that, as contentious as it is, it's a reality of life, unfortunately. However, having said that, for the reasons that Councillor Holland has said, there is no. That does not mean that any delivery business or company gets a free buy in just rough shodding over some of the more rural areas that this is going to be delivered on. And I can see Councillor Sprague scribbling notes furiously, and I'm sure that she will make sure that those points are highlighted adequately at the right time to the right people to ensure that that is taken into account. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I was going to make some comments. This is not a decision-making forum, but just an opportunity for all members of the committee, including myself, to make some comments. But just on your point, Councillor Ritchie, about the need, I did actually go and have a look at the independent report, which was commissioned by Essex County Council, Suffolk County Council, and in terms of need, their conclusion, and it's not actually referenced in Matt's report, was that further sensitivity studies to assess the robustness of need should be taken into account. So it wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the need, because I think things are changing all the time about the amount of, the number of wind farms in particular that are actually going to actually be built in the North Sea. Anyway, having said that, I think for the purposes of this report, those are not the things they're really looking for. I was pleased, I'm concerned about the piling, the hours of operation for piling, which I think is unacceptable, to be starting at 7 o'clock in the morning with an hour beforehand. I was concerned, I think we should make reference to not have any excessive hedgerow removal for huge bell mouths, etc., to be created. Very alarming to hear about 10,000 trees being lost, but there we go. And yes, Councillor Holland's made the point about road closures and the importance of avoiding unnecessary disruption for local residents and to consult with local residents. But also there's reference in your report to cumulative impact. And I do think we should add to the things that listed there potential local plan allocations, because I know that National Grid did make an objection in relation to the proposal near Kelvedon, and also quarries as well in terms of cumulative impact. Not that they make a great deal of difference, but I just think that assessment should be taken into account by an examiner. But those were the only things that sort of jumped out at me. But I don't know if does anybody else want to make any comment at all? Councillor Schwer?
Yeah, thank you. I think one comment is to actually start looking at this strategically, as you mentioned, about the importance of this, future UK renewable energy. But actually, when all of this is going to get built and being done, we're going to be in unitaries. So, we've also got to think of the site as a big picture. I know we're concentrating on this, but we are going to be part of something much bigger. So I think that strategic element is important. The other thing is that, I mean, there's quite a lot, and after Councillor Holland mentioned a lot of the detail, but it's also about the closing of the public rights of ways to ensure that there is adequate alternatives posted well in time during that whole phase as well. And I think there potentially ought to be a mention about effectively windfall payments to those communities that are going to be affected by this during the construction stage. I know National Grid have already thought they will leave some funding, but I actually think to mitigate, potentially should this go ahead in its current suggestion format, that there should be funding available to those residents, and as been mentioned, this is mainly going to affect rural communities on the way. So that's quite a lot. Also, the haul roads. So, I mean, that social value funding, I think, is pretty important. And the other one is the haul roads, when they go in, a lot of that's going to be quite local. So I think if and when this does go ahead, that there is perhaps, because I think it's not going to be very popular. What about the use of asking National Grid when it's local to use local companies to reduce the amount of highways actions and traffic vehicle movements and movements of HGV materials as well? So to try and, where it's built locally, to keep it local, to use local materials to avoid roads being closed unnecessarily in longer days. And will they be better? I don't know how they build it, but I think it's section by section. I thought Councillor Holland will know this to greater effect. And also you mentioned about the trees, which is really important, about the loss of that. When that is replanted, it needs to have, the planning conditions on it to ensure that that is going to last and be looked after for the right trees, right place, disease resistance, right mix, also the right topography as well, because it also needs to be rejoining up and connecting the countryside, because a lot of this will be connections that may get lost during the construction phase, so it needs to be reconnected and ensure that large areas of perhaps established woodland are joined by hedges and everything else for the movement of all the animals as well. So I think there's a lot to think of, but I think the important point is strategically how we're going to look at it with the unitaries coming along as well. And also, as has been mentioned by lots of people, the use of high voltage, high density, high voltage instead of pylons. There's still that potential option, and have they really listened to the possibilities?
You know, have another bite of the cherry.
Yes, that's all. But I'm just conscious of the time, that's only, so perhaps we can, we might need move standing orders in a minute, but...
This is two things. Short-term plea. There's currently a consultation open by National Grid as to how this community benefit or fund is spent and where it's spent. And I personally would urge everybody to respond to this, and I'm certainly not going to try telling you what to do, but I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. My argument is that this funding should be used to deliver benefits to communities who are the communities that are hosting this infrastructure. It should be spent on tangible, long-term benefits to those communities. And the reason I say that is really simple. The pylons we look at in Twinstead, and believe me, you've seen no photograph that's anything like the impact that they have on the landscape where I live. The first pylons were put there in about 1928, and most of them 1930, those are the old 132s. The 400 kilovolt system went in the 1960s. What I can tell you is those pylons that went in the 1960s are in absolutely first-class condition now. They're not going to be going anywhere in anybody in this room's lifetime. That's what long-term means in this context. And so I think we should be looking to encourage National Grid to invest in things like that, not in essentially consumable things or things which benefit in the next 2 years and not going forward. And the other thing I would suggest is that I personally believe that those assets should be environmental, sustainable, and in many cases community building assets. And with that I will shut up for the second time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just quickly, for the sake of Councillor Spray's note, I think the visual impact of the ceiling hang compounds needs to be really considered. And also, I know this is something Councillor Spray's encountered already, but haul roads should not be built in such a way that they completely destroy a farmer's carefully drained field, and they should try and avoid damage to agricultural land in creating those haul roads. Anybody else want to comment on this? In which case, I think our we just need to presumably just note this report, do we, Chris? So it's noted. Thanks for your... Got this, Councillor Ritchie.
Can I move standing orders by
Yes,
10 minutes
please.
to allow us to complete this evening's agenda?
Yes, please. Anyone a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Holland. Yep. All those in favour? Yep. Right, we'll crack on with these last two. Sorry, I have to scroll back to the top of the agenda. Right, we're now on to item 7 on the agenda, which is tree preservation orders. We have two applications and we'll deal with them separately. The first one is item 7A on your agenda, application number 25/01453 TPO. This is open space at Hants Lane, Rain, and that's at page 166 of your agenda. And Chris is doing this, I think.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The first TPO application we have is over in Rain. So there are 7 trees in totals that are proposed for works. I should just say the reason this is being brought before the Planning Committee is because the application is made by Braintree District Council. We are the applicant, so for probity reasons it's being reported. So the summary, I won't go through the description which is contained within the papers, but essentially it's maintenance works to a number of trees. It includes a felling of one tree, 0509. I'll just take you through the plans to start with. Bear with me. So the location, so we are located off of Hants Lane in Rain, so we've got a series of connected areas of open space. So we've got the red line plan here, and then the clustering of the trees. So essentially in 2 clusters, we have some of the proposed works to these trees up in this corner, but also within the central. So one of the observations which is made within the report is actually the trees are visually prominent. They offer a high value of amenity. In terms of the issues, so the apple tree, which is the 0509, which is proposed for removal, it's relatively small, it's in very poor condition and is largely dead. So the removal of it is considered to be in line with good arboricultural practices. All the other trees are in good condition. As I said, given the location of them, they offer a high amenity value and they're visually prominent. But they are located close to residential properties, and therefore as they're on council-owned land, we have a duty of care and we want to reduce and limit any potential harms of falling deadwood or any other risks associated with those properties or footpaths. So the work that's proposed is considered in line with sort of good management from an agricultural sense, and would assist with our duty of care as the landowner. Given the amount of trees within that space, it's not considered that the loss of the apple tree by itself would necessitate a need for a replacement tree in this particular case, so it's not recommended as a condition. If it was a standalone tree, quite often we would require a replacement tree, but given the coverage in that particular area, we were comfortable that its removal would be okay from an amenity perspective. So in terms of the representations, just to be clear, so no objections from Rain Parish Council, and we haven't had any representations from any other residents. And on that basis, it's recommended that consent is granted for the proposed works to the trees. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Hooks.
Obviously, knowing the area well, I totally agree with the officer's recommendations, so happy to move.
Anybody else want to make any comments? Okay, that has been moved and seconded. All those in favour of officer's recommendation. Thank you, members. Now we'll move on to the last item this evening, item 7B on your agenda, application number 25/01455. Now the TPO, this is land adjacent to Alderford Well in Sybil Hedingham. Chris is going to give us a presentation again.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So another TPO application again, same reason being brought to Planning Committee. So we're over in Sybil Hedingham on land adjacent to Alderford Water Mill. roughly in the centre of the village, and forms part of the River Walk, and adjacent to the listed building. So as with the others, it's quite a prominent location. It's an ash tree in this particular case, and it's proposed to crown reduce it by 30% and reducing the laterals by 4 metres and removing dead wood. So again, very much in line with sort of normal good management practices for the tree. We have the site location plan there in red just to give you the context. So we have, you can just see the closest building, which is Alderford Mill, to the right hand side. And then the actual image of the tree, and you can see it's a fairly large specimen in close proximity. Picture of it as well, so again you can see the spread of the canopy, and that's one of the reasons why the reduction is proposed to reduce that encroachment towards the mill. So again, large mature specimen, high prominent within the landscape in the area, offers a high amenity value. The building adjacent is Grade 2 listed. There is signs of dead wood, but also symptoms of moderate infection with ash dieback, which is something we always need to be conscious of with ash trees. But again, like with the previous application, the proposals here are considered to be in line with sort of sound agricultural management and to assist with our duty of care to manage the risk and reduce any potential nuisance from the tree. The proposed works are not considered to harm the integrity of the tree, and are therefore recommended for approval. Again, as with the last one, Sybil Headingham Parish Council raised no objections, and we didn't receive any other representations at all from residents either. So on that basis, the proposed works are recommended to be granted. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Beavers.
Thank you, Chairman. Nothing to add, and I'm happy to move officers' recommendations if colleagues are happy.
Councillor Ritchie, seconding. Yeah, I'll just make a small comment, Chris, that I'm told that larger mature ash trees are much less likely to be affected by dieback than the younger ones. Councillor Robert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I'm not going to object to the proposal, but I was rather slightly intrigued at the photograph, comparing it with the description. I mean, that crown looked pretty healthy compared to a lot of ash trees. So I'm a little bit at a loss of the text which said that it's suffering from cholera. It may well be, but a lot of ash trees look a hell of a lot worse than that. And also it said significant dieback in the crown. Well, I know it's only a photograph, we had a quick glimpse at it, but it's not that bad. So it's a lovely tree, and yeah, it probably does need the work to it, but I just thought the description didn't really match what we were seeing on screen. But the point about cholera is a serious one. I mean, it does look to be the bigger, longer established ashes do seem to have a bit more of a resistance. But sort of the middle-sized ones, 20, 30 foot, they're going so fast now, and we are going to lose probably the majority of ash trees in this country, which is a terrible shame.
Just very briefly, Councillor, but all I can confirm, so the tree has been inspected by one of the agricultural officers, so that's been verified. But I appreciate your comment about the photograph. Yeah, that's certainly the recommendation from our agricultural officer following the inspection of the tree. And as a result of that, the works have been proposed on that basis.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of officer's recommendation? Okay, again, that's unanimous. Well, thank you very much, members, for indulging a very long meeting, and hopefully the next one won't be so long. So, close the meeting at 10:15.